The training post didn't fight back, which was the problem. Naruto slammed his fist into the wood for the 100th time that evening, feeling the bark splinter under his knuckles, feeling the sting crawl up through his wrist and forearm, and not caring. The post absorbed it all, took every hit. Never moved, never adapted, never forced him to think. It was just a stupid log jammed into the ground in training field 7, and he'd been hitting it since the sun was still up. The sun was gone now. Deep purple bruised the sky to the west, and the first stars were winking into existence above the tree line. Somewhere in the village, he could hear the distant clatter of the evening crowd at Ikaraku's. Laughter, conversation, people going home to people who were waiting for them. He hit the post again. His knuckles were bleeding. He could feel the fox's chakra doing its thing underneath his skin, the wounds already knitting closed even as he split them open again. A stupid cycle. Pointless. Like most of what he'd done today, Kakashi had canceled training, again. No, that wasn't quite right. Kakashi hadn't canceled training. He'd shown up 3 hours late, given Naruto and Sakura a vague chakra control exercise to work through, and then pulled Sasuke aside for specialized instruction. Naruto had watched them disappear into the far end of the training field, Kakashi's hand on Sasuke's shoulder, already talking in that low, serious voice he never used with anyone else. Sakura had left after an hour. "I've got studying to do," she'd said, and Naruto didn't blame her. There was nothing to stay for. He'd stayed anyway. Practiced the chakra control exercise until he could do it perfectly, then did it again, then realized nobody was coming back to check his work. So he'd switched to taijutsu drills, then combination attacks against shadow clones. Then, when the clones started feeling as repetitive as the training post, he'd come here. To hit wood until his hands stopped working. Pathetic. He knew it was pathetic. That was the worst part. Naruto stepped back from the post and shook out his hands, watching the blood dry and the skin crawl back together. 16 years old, and he still couldn't get a teacher to look at him for more than 10 minutes. Jiraiya was gone. Again. Research. The old pervert had said, waggling his eyebrows in that way that meant he'd be gone for weeks, maybe months. He'd taught Naruto the Rasengan, sure. He'd helped with the summoning contract. But then he just left. The way everyone left, and Kakashi, Naruto ground his teeth. Kakashi had Sasuke to worry about, the Sharingan to develop, the genius to cultivate. Naruto understood it, intellectually, the way you understand that fire is hot or water is wet. It made strategic sense for the village. Sasuke was the last Uchiha, the prodigy, the flight risk, who needed careful handling. But understanding it didn't make it hurt less. He slammed his fist into the post one more time, hard enough that the wood cracked down the middle with a sound like a rifle shot. The top half tilted drunkenly sideways and fell into the grass. "Great," Naruto muttered. "Now I owe the village a training post." He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the broken post. The night air was cool on his skin, carrying the scent of pine and earth and something faintly sweet, late-blooming jasmine from the gardens along the river path. His stomach growled. He should eat, go home, sleep, do it all again tomorrow. Instead, he started walking toward the forest. He didn't have a reason. Or maybe the reason was that his apartment was small and empty, and he wasn't ready for that yet. The forest at night was vast and alive, and didn't care whether he was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, or the class clown, or the dead last. The trees didn't have opinions about him. That was restful in a way nothing else was. Naruto moved through the first line of trees and kept going, deeper, past the marked training areas and into the old-growth forest that climbed the hills north of the village. The canopy thickened overhead until the stars disappeared, and he navigated by feel and by the faint, ambient glow of his own chakra, something he'd learned to do during those long, lonely training sessions nobody asked about. He wasn't sure how long he walked. 20 minutes. 30. The sounds of the village faded until all he could hear was wind in the branches, the occasional rustle of small animals, and the distant murmur of a creek. His breathing slowed. His fists unclenched. This was better. Out here, the frustration didn't press so close. He was about to loop back toward the village when he heard voices. Naruto stopped. Froze, actually. The instinct came from somewhere deep, the animal part of his brain that recognized wrong before his conscious mind could catch up. Voices out here at this hour, this deep into the forest. Two people speaking low, one of them female. He should have turned around. That was the smart play. Whatever was happening out here, it wasn't his business, and a smarter shinobi would have recognized the risk and ghosted back toward the village without a sound. But Naruto had never been accused of being smart, and curiosity had always been stronger than caution in him. He crouched low and moved toward the voices, stepping carefully, keeping his chakra pulled tight against his body the way Jiraiya had taught him. It wasn't perfect, his chakra control never was, but in the darkness, against the ambient noise of the forest, it was good enough. The voices resolved into words as he crept closer. "Can't keep meeting like this. Someone will notice the pattern." The female voice. Familiar, but Naruto couldn't place it yet. 3 more weeks. A man's voice, unfamiliar. Rough with an accent Naruto didn't recognize. "That's all I need. The contact in the capital is being careful, but he's found the records." They were moved to an auxiliary archive after the Third's restructuring. Original mission files, deployment orders, the full chain of "keep your voice down." "We're 2 kilometers from the nearest patrol route. I checked." "You checked the published patrol routes." "Anbu runs ghost routes that don't appear on any schedule. Believe me." Naruto was close enough now that he could see them through a gap in the undergrowth. A small clearing, barely 5 meters across, where a fallen tree had opened a hole in the canopy. Moonlight spilled through, painting everything in silver and shadow. The woman stood with her back to a tree, arms crossed, her posture rigid with tension. Dark hair, long and wild, catching the moonlight. A dress that looked almost like bandages wrapped in an intricate pattern. Red eyes that caught the light like a cat's when she turned her head. Naruto's stomach dropped. Kurenai Yuhai. He knew her. Everyone in the village knew her, or at least knew of her. One of the most respected jounin in Konoha, the genjutsu specialist who'd made jounin at an unusually young age. She led Team 8, Hinata's sensei. Naruto had spoken to her maybe 6 times in his life, always in passing, always briefly. She'd been polite but distant, like most of the jounin were with him, courteous the way you were courteous with someone else's problem. The man across from her was nobody Naruto recognized. Middle-aged, weathered, wearing nondescript traveling clothes. No visible headband, no village affiliation markers. He carried a small leather satchel over one shoulder and stood with the easy balance of someone used to moving through rough terrain. A merchant, maybe, or someone who wanted to look like one. 3 weeks, the man repeated. "After that, I'll have copies of everything. Names, dates, authorization codes, proof." "Proof isn't enough," Kurenai said. "Proof gets buried. People who carry proof get buried with it." "Then what do you want?" "I want leverage. I want something that makes it more dangerous to silence me than to let me speak. That's different from proof." The man was quiet for a moment. "That's a dangerous distinction, Yuhai. I'm aware. If they find out you've been, I know what happens if they find out." Kurenai's voice was flat, controlled. The voice of someone who had thought about this exact scenario many times and decided to proceed anyway. "Just get the records. I'll handle the rest." The man nodded. He reached into his satchel and produced a small scroll which he set on the fallen tree between them. "Interim findings. Everything I have so far. The timeline of the mission, the deployment records I've already verified, and a list of names that appear on the authorization chain." Kurenai picked up the scroll, turned it over in her hands, and tucked it into the folds of her dress without opening it. "Same dead drop protocol for next contact. Alternate site, I'll leave a marker at." The man stopped. His head turned. Not toward Naruto, toward a point about 30 degrees to the left where a branch had creaked in the wind, just the wind. But the sudden silence was total. And in that silence, Naruto realized he'd been holding his breath so hard that the next one came out in a thin, ragged gasp, louder than it should have been. Kurenai moved so fast that Naruto's eyes couldn't track her. One instant, She was standing by the tree. The next, the undergrowth around him exploded inward, and something hit him in the chest like a battering ram, driving him backward off his feet. His back slammed into a tree trunk. A hand closed around his throat, not crushing, but firm, precise, the grip of someone who knew exactly how much pressure it took to pin someone without killing them. Red eyes filled his vision, not sharing in red, deeper than that. Natural, vivid red, wide with adrenaline, and something that looked like genuine terror. Kurenai Yuhai stared at him from 6 inches away, and Naruto watched her expression cycle through recognition, disbelief, and something cold and calculating that scared him more than the hand on his throat. "Uzumaki," she breathed. Naruto managed. Hi, her grip tightened, not enough to choke him, but enough to make the message clear. "How long have you been here?" I was walking and..." How long he could lie. The thought surfaced and was immediately discarded because her eyes were boring into his, and he was suddenly, viscerally aware that this woman could kill him. Not theoretically, not in the abstract way that all jounin were dangerous. Kurenai Yuhai could reach into his mind with genjutsu and make him experience his own death in 1,000 different ways without ever drawing a kunai. He'd heard stories. Everyone had heard stories. "Long enough," he said quietly. Kurenai's jaw tightened. Behind her, the man in the clearing had vanished, simply gone like he'd never been there at all. Professional? "What did you hear?" Kurenai asked. "Records. Authorization codes. Your contact is getting copies of something. You're looking for leverage." Naruto swallowed against her palm. "You're investigating something. Something you really don't want anyone to know about." For a long, terrible moment, Kurenai just looked at him. The forest was utterly silent. An owl called somewhere in the distance, oblivious to the fact that 2 shinobi were having the tensest staring contest of their lives 50 feet below its perch. "You don't know what you heard," Kurenai said, and there was something almost like pleading under the hard edge of her voice. "You walked through the forest at night and heard 2 people talking, and you don't know the context, the reasons. Or, I know it's something that would get you in serious trouble if the village found out," Naruto said. He wasn't sure where the words were coming from. Some calm, calculating place he didn't usually operate from. The desperation, maybe. The weeks and months and years of desperation crystallizing into clarity at exactly the wrong moment, or exactly the right one. Meeting someone with no headband. Talking about secret records and buried proof and leverage. That's, at best, that's unauthorized intelligence work. At worst, don't. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Kurenai's hand trembled against his throat. "Don't say it." He didn't say it. He didn't need to. The word hung between them anyway, unspoken. Treason. "Let me go," Naruto said. "Please." Kurenai stared at him for another 3 heartbeats, then released her grip and stepped back. Naruto sagged against the tree, rubbing his throat. She stood a few feet away, her posture coiled, her hands at her sides. Ready. Deciding. Naruto recognized the calculation happening behind those red eyes because he'd seen it before, in different faces, for different reasons. She was figuring out what to do with him. Every option was on the table. Every single one. "I'm not going to fight you," he said, because it seemed important to say out loud. "And I'm not going to run to the Hokage or Anbu or whatever you're afraid of right now." "Then what are you going to do?" The question landed, and Naruto found that the answer was already there, fully formed, as if some part of him had been building it since the moment he recognized her face in the moonlight. Maybe since before that. Maybe since Kakashi had walked away with Sasuke that afternoon and left him standing alone in an empty training field. "I want you to train me," he said. Kurenai blinked. Of all the things she'd been bracing for, threats, demands for money, naive declarations about reporting her, this clearly wasn't on the list. What? Train me? Teach me? Actually show up and work with me and treat it like it matters. The words were coming fast now, tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "I'm not asking for your whole life. A few hours a week. Consistent, regular, you train me, and nobody ever hears about tonight. That's the deal." Kurenai stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're..." You're blackmailing me into being your teacher. Yeah, Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. It sounds insane. I was going to say straightforward. You could ask for anything. Kurenai's voice had shifted. Still tense, still wary, but now threaded with bewilderment. Money, favors, political leverage, information you could sell, and you want lessons? I want a sensei who actually teaches me something. You have a sensei, Kakashi Headache. Naruto laughed. It came out bitter and sharp, and surprised even him with how much it hurt. Yeah, Kakashi, the guy who shows up when he feels like it and spends all his time on Sasuke. The copy ninja who's taught me exactly one thing in the entire time I've known him, tree climbing. Tree climbing, Kurenai-sensei. I learned more from Ibisu, and Ibisu hates me. Something flickered across Kurenai's face. Not sympathy, exactly. More like recognition. That's not my problem, she said, but the edge was softer now. No, Naruto agreed. It's mine, and this is how I'm solving it. Silence settled between them. The wind stirred the canopy overhead, and a shaft of moonlight shifted across the clearing, catching the edge of Kurenai's face. She looked tired, Naruto realized. Not the normal tired of a jounin running missions and training genin. A deeper tired. The kind that came from carrying something heavy and hidden for a very long time. If I say no, she said slowly, you'll talk. I don't want to, but yeah, you realize I could just... She gestured vaguely. The gesture encompassed several options, none of them pleasant. You could, Naruto said. But you won't. Because whatever you're doing out here, whatever you're investigating, it matters to you. A lot. Enough to risk everything for it. And killing a kid, even a Jinchuriki nobody would miss, creates exactly the kind of attention you can't afford right now. Kurenai's eyes narrowed. That's surprisingly strategic thinking for someone with your reputation. I'm not as stupid as people think. Clearly. More silence. Kurenai paced the small space between the trees, her movements sharp and restless. Naruto waited. He'd played his card, the only card he had. If she called his bluff, and some part of him acknowledged that it was a bluff, that he probably wouldn't actually report her, because ruining someone's life wasn't in him no matter how desperate he was, then he had nothing. But she didn't know that, and the fear in her eyes was real. 3 conditions, Kurenai said finally, stopping mid-pace and fixing him with a look that could have peeled paint off a wall. Okay. First, you never speak of what you saw tonight, not to friends, not to other shinobi, not in your sleep. If I find out you've breathed a word to anyone, the deal is off, and I will make you regret it in ways your imagination isn't equipped to process. Fair. Second, you do exactly what I tell you during training. No arguments, no shortcuts, no but Naruto wants to learn the cool jutsu first. I decide the curriculum, I decide the pace. You're buying my expertise, you don't get to complain about how it's delivered. Also fair. Third, Kurenai stepped closer, her voice dropped. We are not friends, we are not bonding. This is a transaction, and when it's done, when my work is finished and you've gotten your training, we walk away clean. No lingering entanglements, no debts, no sentimentality. Understood? Naruto looked up at her. The moonlight made her features sharp, almost severe. Beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, precision crafted, and absolutely not designed for comfort. Understood, he said. Kurenai held his gaze for a long moment, searching for something. Deception, maybe? Hidden angles. She apparently didn't find them because she exhaled through her nose a long, controlled breath that was probably a substitute for screaming and nodded once. Tomorrow, training field 11, 5 am, her lip curled. Don't be late. I'm never late, Naruto said. That's Kakashi's thing. Kurenai turned and walked into the darkness without another word. Naruto watched her go, listening to her footsteps fade until the forest was quiet again. Then he slid down the tree trunk and sat on the ground with his back against the bark, staring up at the stars through the gap in the canopy. His hands were shaking. He looked down at them, surprised. The fox's healing had closed every wound, left the skin smooth and unmarked, but the tremor ran deep, down through muscle and bone to somewhere fundamental. He'd just blackmailed a jounin. A woman who could destroy him 6 different ways before breakfast. He'd stood there with her hand on his throat and gambled everything on a read of her character that was based on nothing more than instinct and desperation. And it had worked. Naruto pressed his palms against his knees until the shaking stopped. Then he stood up, brushed the dirt off his pants, and started walking home. He had to be up early. Training Field 11 was on the eastern edge of the village, tucked between the base of the Hawkage Monument and a section of old-growth forest that hadn't been cleared for development. It was an unpopular spot, too far from the main training complexes, too hilly, and the morning shadow of the monument kept it cold until well past noon, which was probably why Kurenai had chosen it. Naruto arrived at 4:45 because if there was one thing he was going to do right, it was not give her an excuse to call the whole thing off in the first 5 minutes. The field was empty. Mist clung to the low ground near the tree line, and the grass was silver with frost. Naruto's breath plumed in the pre-dawn air. He bounced on his toes to stay warm and tried not to think about the fact that he'd slept maybe 2 hours. At exactly 5 o'clock, Kurenai stepped out of the tree line. She was dressed differently than the night before, standard jounin gear, practical and dark. Her forehead protector gleamed in the weak light. She carried nothing else. No training scrolls, no equipment, no weapons beyond the standard kunai pouch at her hip. She stopped 10 meters from Naruto and looked him over with an expression of absolute nothing. Not anger, not contempt, not resignation, just blank professional assessment, the way a carpenter might look at a warped piece of lumber and calculate whether it was worth salvaging. "You're here," she said, not impressed, just noting a fact. "I said I would be. People say a lot of things." Kurenai folded her arms. "Let's get something clear before we start. I don't know what you think this is going to be. I don't know what fantasies you've built up in your head about learning devastating techniques and becoming unstoppable. But let me adjust your expectations right now. You are, by every measurable standard, one of the worst-trained shinobi of your graduating class." The words hit like a slap. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but Kurenai continued without pause. "Your taijutsu is brawling. No form, no discipline, just power and aggression. Your ninjutsu consists of 2 techniques, shadow clones and the Rasengan, both of which rely on your absurd chakra reserves rather than any actual skill. Your chakra control is abysmal. Your tactical awareness is non-existent. You have no genjutsu ability whatsoever. You can't detect genjutsu, you can't break genjutsu, and you certainly can't cast genjutsu. In a real fight against a prepared opponent, you survive on raw power and dumb luck, and one day those are going to run out." She paused. The silence was brutal. "Still want me to be your teacher?" Naruto's jaw was tight. Every word she'd said was barbed, and every barb had found its mark because every barb was true. He could argue, could bluster, could point to his wins, Haku, Neji, Gaara. But those victories, honest as they were, had all been exactly what she described. Power and luck and the fox churning away beneath his skin like a furnace he couldn't control. "Yeah," he said. "I still want you to be my teacher." Something shifted in Kurenai's expression. Microscopic. If Naruto hadn't been watching her so intently, he would have missed it. The faintest relaxation around her eyes, as if she'd expected him to fold and was, not disappointed that he hadn't. "Then we start with the thing you're worst at," she said. "Genjutsu," Naruto groaned. "Can't we start with something I'm actually? What was my second condition?" He closed his mouth. "Right, no arguments." Kurenai crossed the distance between them and stopped an arm's length away. Up close in the growing light, Naruto could see the faint shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept either. "Genjutsu is the art of controlling perception," she said. "Every ninja thinks it's about casting illusions, making someone see things that aren't there. That's the application. It's not the art. The art is understanding how people perceive the world and exploiting the gaps in that perception. Everyone has gaps. Everyone has assumptions they don't question, patterns they follow without thinking, blind spots they don't know exist." She paused. "Even you. Especially me." "I wasn't going to say that, but yes." Naruto almost smiled. Almost. before you can learn Genjutsu, if you can learn Genjutsu at all, which is an open question you need to learn to detect it. That's where we start. I'm going to place you under a Genjutsu, a mild one. Your job is to figure out when it started, what it's changing, and how to break out. How do I break out? Disruption of your own chakra flow. Concentrate your energy into an internal pulse and release it outward. The technical term is Kai, release. Every academy student is taught the theory, though I doubt you were paying attention that day. He hadn't been. He'd been drawing pictures of ramen bowls on his desk while Uruka lectured, but he wasn't about to admit that. Ready? Kurenai asked. Ready? She made a single hand sign, subtle, almost casual, her fingers blurring through the seal so fast he could barely track it. Nothing happened. Naruto waited. The field looked the same. The mist, the frost, the distant monument carved against the brightening sky. He could hear birds starting up in the tree line. A breeze stirred the grass. Everything was normal. Well, Kurenai said, find it. He looked around. Checked the obvious things, colors, shapes, sounds. Everything seemed right. The grass was green. The sky was lightening to pale gold in the east. Kurenai was standing in front of him, arms folded, watching him with those unnerving red eyes. But something was off. He could feel it in his gut, a wrongness he couldn't name. Like wearing a shirt that was slightly too tight, not painful, but constantly present. The sound, he said slowly. The birds, they are the same pattern, repeating. The real birds wouldn't do that. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Good, that's one layer. There are two more. Find them. Two more. Naruto closed his eyes and focused, trying to feel past the surface. The wrongness was there, swimming just below conscious awareness. He'd felt it before, he realized, in the forest of death, during the Chunin exams, when that grass ninja had hit him with a killing intent so thick it was almost physical. The same kind of subtle displacement, like reality had shifted 1 degree to the left. The temperature, he said. It should be getting warmer. The sun's rising, but I'm still cold. The same amount of cold as when I got here. 2, 1 more. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at Kurenai, looked at her carefully, and then he saw it, or rather didn't see it, her breath. The air was cold enough that every exhale should have been visible, a plume of white vapor in the pre-dawn chill. His own breath was fogging in front of his face, but Kurenai wasn't breathing visible air. You, he said. You're not really standing there, or you are, but you look different. The Genjutsu is showing me a version of you that doesn't have breath vapor, because the illusion doesn't account for. Break it. Right. The pulse thing. Naruto clenched his fists, concentrated on the chakra running through his core, that vast, churning ocean he carried inside him, always pressing against his pathways, always too much for the channels to hold, and tried to push it outward. It was like trying to squeeze an ocean through a garden hose. The energy surged, wild and unfocused, and he felt something tear in his perception. The world flickered. For a fraction of a second, he saw the real training field 11 overlaid on the illusory one. The differences were small, the bird sounds randomized into natural chaos, the air temperature shifting against his skin, and Kurenai 3 feet to the left of where the illusion placed her, her breath fogging normally in the cold. Then the Genjutsu collapsed around him, and it was like surfacing from water he hadn't known he was under. The real world rushed in, sharper, rower, louder. He staggered. Sloppy, Kurenai said. She was in her real position now, 3 feet to the left, watching him. You used about 50 times more chakra than necessary. A proper Kai is a scalpel, not a bomb. If you do that in the field, you'll signal every sensor-type ninja within a kilometer. But I broke it. A toddler can break a window. That doesn't make them a glazier. She paused. But yes, you broke it. Faster than I expected. Naruto looked up. How fast? My genin took 3 days to break that illusion. Kiba needed 4. You did it in about 90 seconds. Something warm bloomed in Naruto's chest. Not pride exactly, it was too fragile for that. More like the first spark of a fire that hadn't decided yet whether it was going to catch. The detection was instinctive, Kurenai said, and now she was studying him with genuine interest. You didn't analyze it logically. You felt the wrongness first and then worked backward to identify the cause. That's unusual. Most people either have strong analytical detection or strong instinctive detection. Having both is rare. Is that good? It's interesting. I don't know if it's good yet. She turned and walked toward the center of the field. Again, harder this time, and try not to vomit. Naruto followed her. Wait, vomit? Why would I? The world turned inside out. He was standing in the field, but the field was wrong. The sky was below him, and the ground was above, and he was falling upward toward Earth while the clouds churned beneath his feet. His stomach lurched violently, every nerve screaming that gravity was lying, that up was down, and the world had been inverted like a cup turned over. He stumbled, hit his knees, and barely kept his breakfast down. Find the seams. Kurenai's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Don't trust your eyes. Don't trust your inner ear. Find what's real. Naruto gasped, squeezed his eyes shut, and tried to think. The ground under his knees was solid, real. He could feel the grass, the cold earth, the slight dampness of frost melting under body heat. That was real. The rest was the lie. He gathered chakra again, too much, way too much. He could feel it flooding his pathways like a river breaking its banks, and shoved it outward. The illusion shattered. Naruto was on his hands and knees in the middle of Training Field 11, the real Training Field 11, with the sky where it belonged and his stomach slowly unclenching. 80 seconds, Kurenai said. She was standing over him, hands on her hips. Better time, still using way too much chakra. A Chunin-level genjutsu user would have locked you down twice over in the time it took you to build that pulse. You're a really encouraging teacher, you know that? You didn't come to me for encouragement. You came because you wanted someone who would actually teach you. This is what teaching looks like. Get up. Naruto got up. They went again, and again, and again. By the time the sun cleared the monument and warm light finally spilled across Training Field 11, Naruto had been placed under 17 different genjutsu. He'd broken all of them, though the later ones took longer as fatigue set in and his control, already poor, deteriorated further. The last illusion had been a simple but elegant thing that convinced him he was standing still when he was actually walking in slow circles. He'd broken it after 3 full minutes of confusion by biting his own lip hard enough to draw blood, using the pain to shock his system into clarity. Kurenai had not said, "Good job." She had not said, "Well done," or "impressive," or any of the things Iruka used to say when Naruto did something right. What she said was, "You default to pain disruption when your chakra control fails. That works for now, but it's a crutch. An intelligent opponent will incorporate pain into the genjutsu itself, making your escape mechanism part of the trap. We'll need to fix that." And somehow that was better than "good job." Because it meant she was planning ahead. It meant there would be a next time. Naruto sat on the ground, breathing hard, drenched in sweat despite the cold morning. His head was pounding, a deep, throbbing ache behind his eyes that made the world pulse at the edges. Kurenai sat down on a boulder nearby, not close to him, but not far. She produced a canteen from somewhere and took a long drink, then set it on the ground between them. The gesture was utilitarian, they were training, he needed water, but Naruto noticed it anyway. "Your chakra is unusual," she said, not looking at him, staring out across the field at the brightening sky. "I knew it theoretically. Everyone knows the Uzumaki boy has enormous reserves. But feeling it up close is different. It's dense, layered. When you pushed that disruption pulse, there was something underneath your own chakra, something older. Hotter." Naruto said nothing. His hand drifted unconsciously to his stomach. "I'm not asking," Kurenai said. "I know what you carry. Everyone over the age of 20 in this village knows. I'm telling you because it's relevant to your training. Whatever that secondary chakra source is, it seems to interact with genjutsu in ways I haven't encountered before. Your instinctive detection might not be entirely your own ability. The fox's chakra may be disrupting the illusions at a foundational level before your conscious mind even registers them." "Is that cheating?" Kurenai looked at him then. Not with warmth, exactly. But with something that wasn't contempt, which was an improvement over 2 hours ago. "There's no cheating in staying alive," she said. "If the fox gives you an edge against genjutsu, we're going to figure out how it works and turn it into a weapon, not a passive defense, an active tool. That's what a good shinobi does with every advantage they have." Naruto picked up the canteen and drank. The water was cool and tasted faintly of minerals. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and set it down again. "Kurenai-sensei? Don't call me that. Not in public. If anyone asks, we're not associated." "Okay, Kurenai-san," she sighed. "What? Why were you out there last night?" The silence that followed was different from the ones before, not tense, heavy, like the air before a storm when everything goes still and the pressure builds. "That's not part of our arrangement," Kurenai said. "I know, I'm not asking as part of the deal, I'm just asking." She studied him. Whatever she was looking for, she apparently didn't find it because she stood up and brushed off her pants. "Same time tomorrow, don't be late." She paused. "And Uzumaki, eat something substantial tonight. You're going to need the energy." She turned and walked away. Not toward the village, toward the tree line, the same direction she'd come from. Within seconds, the shadows swallowed her, and Naruto was alone in the training field. He sat there for a long time, watching the sun climb. His head hurt. His chakra felt wrung out. Every muscle in his body was singing with the particular soreness that came from mental exertion rather than physical, as if his brain had been running laps while his body stood still. And for the first time in months, he felt like he'd actually accomplished something. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. Naruto arrived at training field 11 at 5 a.m. Kurenai was always there first. She never greeted him, never made small talk, never asked how he was doing. She simply began. The sessions were brutal. Kurenai's teaching style was nothing like Kakashi's distant, figure-it-out-yourself approach, but it wasn't gentle either. She was precise, demanding, and utterly uninterested in his ego. When he did something right, she told him what he did right and immediately moved to the next challenge. When he did something wrong, which was often, she told him exactly why it was wrong, exactly how it would get him killed, and exactly what he needed to do differently. It was the most productive training of his life. By the end of day 2, he could detect her standard genjutsu in under 30 seconds and break it in under 10. She responded by making the illusions more complex, more layered, incorporating multiple sensory channels. She cast illusions that altered not just what he saw, but what he smelled, tasted, felt against his skin. She cast illusions inside illusions. He'd break one and think he was free, only to realize 2 minutes later that the real world he'd broken through to was another layer of deception. "This is genjutsu at the Chunin level," she told him on day 3. After he'd finally torn through a 4-layer illusion that had him convinced, he was back in his apartment, eating breakfast, for a full minute before he noticed the clock on his wall was running backward. Competent but not exceptional. Most jounin can do this. Against a genjutsu specialist, someone at my level or above, the layers would be seamless. You wouldn't find the seams because there wouldn't be any. Then how do you break those? You don't. Not through detection. Against a true specialist, you either disrupt genjutsu at the chakra level before it takes hold, which requires the kind of control you currently don't have, or you recognize that you're compromised and act accordingly. Act how? That depends on the situation. Sometimes the answer is to stop trusting your senses entirely and fight on instinct. Sometimes the answer is to flood the area with enough destructive force that it doesn't matter what you're seeing. And sometimes, she held up one finger. Sometimes the answer is to let the genjutsu user think they've won. Naruto's eyes widened. You can fake being caught in genjutsu, an advanced technique, beyond you right now, but eventually, yes. If you can detect that you're under genjutsu without the caster knowing you've detected it, you can feed their illusion back to them. Make them believe you're trapped while you act freely. It's the ultimate counter. That's what you do. In a real fight, Kurenai's expression flickered. In a real fight, I'm the one casting, but the principle applies in both directions. Day 3 ended differently from the others. Instead of dismissing him and disappearing, Kurenai lingered. She sat on her usual boulder and stared at the tree line with an expression Naruto couldn't read. "Sit down," she said. Naruto sat. They were quiet for a while. The morning sun was warmer now, the frost long gone, and the field smelled of grass and earth and the distant sweetness of the village bakeries starting their ovens. "My father was a jounin," Kurenai said. Naruto went very still. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Some instinct told him that the slightest interruption would seal the door that was cracking open. He was good. Not famous, not legendary, but solid. Reliable. The kind of shinobi they gave the missions that needed doing without anyone asking questions afterward. She paused. "He died on a mission when I was 9. The village told us it was an ambush. Enemy forces. Bad luck and bad intelligence. They gave him a memorial and a name on the stone and the standard condolences, and that was supposed to be the end of it." The wind picked up slightly. A few leaves skittered across the field. "Last year, I found a letter. Hidden in the lining of a jacket my mother had saved. She'd passed by then, too. The letter was from my father, written the night before his last mission. He wrote that he'd discovered something while on a routine deployment. Something about operations being run out of Konoha that nobody had authorized. Black ops, deep cover, using village resources without council oversight." Kurenai's voice was steady, controlled, but her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. He reported what he found through proper channels. He trusted the system, and then, 2 weeks later, he was dead. Naruto's throat was tight. "You think someone killed him?" "I don't think. I know. The mission that killed my father was set up. The deployment was engineered to put him in a situation he couldn't survive. Someone in this village signed the order, someone else carried it out, and then they buried it all under layers of classification and routine paperwork." She turned to look at him. "That's what I was doing in the forest, Uzumaki. That's what the records are. That's what I'm looking for, proof that my father was murdered by his own village for the crime of doing his duty." The weight of it settled over Naruto like a physical thing. He'd known or suspected that Kurenai's secret was serious. But this was more than a secret. This was a wound, years old, hidden so deep that she'd carried it alone in silence while training Genin and running missions and living her life as if everything was fine. He knew what that felt like. Not the specifics, his own wounds were different shapes, but the weight, the loneliness of carrying something you couldn't share. "I'm sorry," he said. It was inadequate and he knew it, but it was honest. Kurenai turned away. "I didn't tell you for sympathy. I told you because you're in this now, whether we like it or not. If the wrong people find out what I'm doing, they won't stop at me. Anyone associated with me becomes a target, including a loud, conspicuous, 16-year-old Jinchuriki who can't keep a secret to save his life. I can keep this one. You'd better." She stood. "Tomorrow we start on chakra sensing. If someone's watching us, and eventually someone will be, you need to be able to feel them before they get close." She walked away, then stopped at the edge of the field without turning around. "Uzumaki." "Yeah." "Your instincts were right about one thing. In the forest, when you made your demand, you read me correctly, I wouldn't have hurt you. I don't hurt children." A pause. "But I need you to understand something. The people I'm investigating, they would." Without hesitation, without remorse, and without anyone ever knowing. "So when I tell you to be careful, I'm not being dramatic. I am being precise." She vanished into the tree line. Naruto sat in the field alone, the sun warming his face, and thought about fathers and secrets, and the things a village did when no one was watching. He almost ran into Hinata on the way home. Literally, he came around the corner from the market district, head down, still lost in thought, and nearly bowled her over. She squeaked and stumbled backward, and he caught her arm on instinct, steadying her before she went down. "Ah, Naruto-kun? Sorry." "Sorry, Hinata. I wasn't paying attention." Her face was already red, which was normal for Hinata when he was within 10 feet of her. Naruto had long ago categorized this as Hinata just blushes a lot and filed it away under things about people I don't fully understand. "It's okay," she said, pressing her index fingers together in that way she did. I should have been watching where." She stopped, tilted her head. "Are you all right?" "What, Yeah, fine, why? You seem— She studied him with those pale, perceptive eyes. Different. Tired, but not the usual tired. More like— She trailed off, apparently lacking the words. Naruto forced a grin. The standard one, wide and easy and designed to reassure. Just training hard, gotta keep up with everybody. Hinata didn't look convinced, but she nodded. You've been going out early. I noticed, not that I watch you, or I just happen to be awake early sometimes, and— You noticed. Her blush deepened to scarlet. The Hyuga compound is near training field 11. I sometimes practice in the gardens at dawn. I saw you heading that direction the past few mornings. I just wondered if— She trailed off again. Naruto looked at her, really looked at her, not the quick, surface-level glance he usually gave, and saw concern there. Genuine, quiet, uncomplicated concern. New training regimen, he said. Nothing exciting. Just trying to fill some gaps in my skills. Hinata nodded slowly. If you ever need a training partner— I'm not very skilled, but— You're plenty skilled, Hinata. You beat that Chunin from sand in the last joint exercise, remember? The one who was twice your size. Her eyes went wide. You saw that? Yeah, that gentle fist combo you used at the end was insane. You hit him like 8 times in 2 seconds, and he just folded. Hinata looked like she might actually faint. Naruto made a mental note to be less casual about complimenting her. She didn't seem built for it. I have to run, he said, releasing her arm and stepping around her. But I'll take you up on the training partner thing sometime. For real. He waved and continued down the street, and by the time he turned the next corner, the brief normalcy of the encounter had already faded, replaced by the weight of everything Kurenai had told him. His father was murdered by his own village. No, her father. Not his. Though the parallel was hard to ignore. Naruto's parents had died too, and the village had told him a story about it. The official story, the one everyone knew, the 4th Hokage died sealing the Nine Tails, sacrificing himself to save the village. A hero's death. Clean, noble. But what if that story had layers, the way Kurenai's father's death had layers? What if the truth was more complicated? What if— He shook his head. That was a rabbit hole he couldn't afford right now. One conspiracy at a time. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it, small, cluttered, smelling faintly of instant ramen and the plant on his windowsill that he kept forgetting to water. He kicked off his shoes, collapsed on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. 5 a.m. tomorrow. Chakra sensing. He'd need to sleep, needed his mind sharp. Kurenai's training demanded a clarity he wasn't used to. Kakashi's exercises were physical, brute force challenges that his body could handle on autopilot. Kurenai worked his brain until it felt like wrung-out cloth, and there was no amount of the fox's regeneration that could fix mental fatigue. He rolled over and punched his pillow into shape. Closed his eyes. Sleep didn't come immediately. It rarely did these days. Too many thoughts crowding behind his eyes, jostling for attention. What he kept coming back to was the look on Kurenai's face when she'd told him about her father. Not the grief, that was old, long ago absorbed into the bedrock of who she was. It was the anger. Controlled, contained, compressed like a spring held down for years. The anger of someone who'd been lied to by the people she'd sworn to protect with her life, and who had decided, quietly and alone, that the lie was not acceptable. Naruto understood that anger. He carried a version of it himself, for the years of loneliness, the cold looks, the parents who pulled their children away when he walked by. The village he loved, that he would die for in a heartbeat, had treated him like a monster for 16 years, and he'd forgiven them. Mostly. Because what else could you do? But Kurenai hadn't forgiven, and maybe she was right not to. Maybe there were things that shouldn't be forgiven, not because forgiveness was wrong, but because forgiveness without truth was just another lie. His eyes were heavy. The ceiling blurred. Sleep pulled at him and he let it. Tomorrow. Chakra sensing. 5 am, don't be late. The next morning, Naruto stood in training field 11 with his eyes closed and his arms at his sides, trying to feel the world the way Kurenai described it. Chakra is everywhere. She was saying, pacing slowly around him. In every living thing. Trees, grass, insects, birds, everything that lives produces chakra, even if most of it is too faint for untrained senses to detect. A sensor-type ninja can feel this ambient chakra the way you feel sunlight on your skin. It's not a technique, it's a state of awareness. And you think I can learn it? I think you have the raw sensitivity. Your detection of my genjutsu was partially instinctive. You felt the disruption before you analyzed it. That same instinct, trained and focused, could become sensing ability. The question is whether you can control it. Naruto kept his eyes closed. The world behind his eyelids was dark, but not empty. He could feel the sun on his face, the breeze against his skin, the solidity of the earth under his feet. And beneath all of that, faint and shimmering, something else. A texture to the air that wasn't temperature or humidity or wind, something alive. I feel something, he said slowly. It's like, when you're in a room and someone walks in behind you and they're there before you hear them. It's like that, but more. Good. Now reach outward. Don't push, extend. Like uncurling a fist. Let your awareness expand naturally. He tried. The something that he felt stretched and flickered, and for a moment, just a moment, the darkness behind his eyes bloomed into a landscape of sensation. The trees around the field were pillars of quiet, steady energy. The grass was a carpet of whisper-thin threads, and Kurenai was a bonfire, not literally, but her chakra presence was vivid, intense, precisely controlled. It moved as she moved, pulsing with the rhythm of her heartbeat, and it was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with sight. I can feel you, Naruto said. You're bright, like a fire that's been banked down. The control is, he stopped. Because beyond Kurenai, beyond the field, something else registered. Faint. A presence at the very edge of his expanded awareness, maybe 200 meters away at the tree line. Cold and still and deliberately suppressed, like a hand clamped over a candle flame, someone was watching them. Naruto's eyes snapped open. Kurenai saw the change in his expression and went still. What? She said. Tree line, south-southeast, someone's there. Kurenai didn't look, didn't react visibly, but Naruto saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. How far? She asked, her voice calm. 200 meters. Maybe more. Their chakra is suppressed, almost invisible. If I hadn't been actively sensing, I never would have. Stop. Kurenai moved closer, as if adjusting his posture. Her hands came up to his shoulders, and to any observer it would have looked like a training correction. Her mouth was close to his ear. Do not look in that direction. Do not change your behavior. Continue the exercise as if nothing happened. Naruto's heart was hammering. Is it? I don't know. It could be anyone. Anbu patrols cross through this area, another shinobi using the forest for training. It could be nothing. She paused. But we treat it as something until we know otherwise. Understood? Understood. Kurenai stepped back. Her voice returned to its normal volume, her body language shifting seamlessly back to instructor mode. Your range is impressive for a first attempt, but you're broadcasting. Your sensing pulse is too strong. Anyone with sensitivity would feel you reaching out. We need to make it quieter. Try again, and this time, pull back on the intensity. I want a whisper, not a shout. They continued the exercise for another hour. Naruto followed her lead, keeping his outward behavior normal, but beneath the surface his awareness was stretched taut, monitoring the presence at the tree line. It didn't move. It didn't get closer. It just sat there, watching. Whoever it was, they were patient. And good. When Kurenai finally called the session, the presence was gone. Naruto felt it withdraw, a smooth, clean disengagement like a thread being pulled from cloth. Professional, no trace left behind. Kurenai waited until they were both packed up and moving toward the village before she spoke. You did well today. Naruto almost tripped over his own feet. She said it quickly, almost grudgingly, like the words cost her something. Thanks. Your sensing range is unusual. Most beginners can barely detect someone at 20 meters. You picked up a suppressed presence at 200. She glanced at him sideways. The fox. Maybe, probably, but the interpretation was yours. Sensing the chakra is one thing. Knowing what it meant, feeling the intent behind the suppression, that's analytical. That's you. They walked in silence for a while. The village was waking up around them, shopkeepers opening their fronts, civilians heading to work, a few genin teams gathering at their assigned meeting points. Normal. Mundane. A world that had no idea what was happening in the spaces between its routines. The person at the tree line. Naruto said quietly. How worried should I be? Kurenai didn't answer immediately. They turned a corner, past a tea shop where an old woman was sweeping the entrance, and continued down a residential street before she spoke. I don't know yet. It could have been coincidence. It probably was. She stopped walking and turned to face him. But we moved the training location starting tomorrow. I'll leave a marker at your apartment door with the new coordinates. The marker will look like a piece of junk mail. Read the address. That's the coordinates in a cipher I'll teach you tonight. Tonight? I'll leave instruction materials in your mailbox this evening. Study them before you sleep. She held his gaze. This is what I meant about being careful, Uzumaki. We haven't done anything wrong. A jounin training a shinobi from another team isn't unprecedented. But if the wrong person starts asking why, we need to be ready with an answer that doesn't invite more questions. She turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the morning crowd like smoke into fog. Naruto stood on the street and watched her go. The sun was warm on his face. Around him, the village hummed with its daily rhythms, ordinary, oblivious, alive. 4 days ago, he'd been hitting a training post in an empty field, bleeding from the knuckles and invisible to everyone who mattered. Now, he was learning genjutsu theory from one of the best illusionists in the village, developing a sensing ability he hadn't known he possessed, and tangled in a dead jounin's murder mystery that reached into the roots of Konoha itself. And someone might be watching. Naruto shoved his hands in his pockets and started walking home. He had a cipher to learn, and tomorrow would come early. For the first time in months, he was looking forward to it. Chapter 2. Genjutsu and Ghosts, the new training site, was a shallow ravine cut into the hillside about a kilometer northwest of the village wall, hidden beneath a canopy of old cedars so thick that even midday sun barely penetrated. Kurenai had chosen well. The ravine was too narrow and rocky for standard training exercises, too far from the main paths for casual foot traffic, and the cedar canopy played hell with aerial surveillance. You could stand at the rim and look straight down and not see the bottom through the branches. Naruto had decoded the cipher from Kurenai's instructions in about 40 minutes the night before. It was elegant, a substitution cipher layered over a grid reference system that used Konoha's district numbering as its base key. Memorizing it took longer than cracking it, which he suspected was the point. The cipher wasn't meant to be unbreakable. It was meant to be fast, deniable, and hard to recognize as a cipher at all. He reached the ravine at 4:55 and found Kurenai already there, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock near the ravine floor. She had the small scroll from her contact unrolled across her knees and was reading it with an expression that could have curdled milk. She looked up when he dropped down from the rim, tucking the scroll away in one smooth motion. "You're early again," she said. "Didn't want to miss the fun part where you tell me everything I'm doing wrong." "That's every part." She stood and brushed off her legs. "Did you learn the cipher? Substitution layer over a district grid. The key rotates based on the day of the week, which means old messages can't be decoded without knowing when they were sent." "Smart." Kurenai studied him. "You cracked the rotation mechanism." "Was I not supposed to? I gave you the base cipher." "The rotation was embedded in the instructions as a secondary challenge. I wanted to see if you'd notice." She paused. "Most chunin don't." That almost warmth again. Naruto pushed it down before it could take root. Compliments from Kurenai were like rain in a desert, rare enough that you noticed them, not frequent enough to grow anything. "Today we're combining disciplines," Kurenai said. "Sensing and genjutsu detection simultaneously. In a real engagement, you don't get to pause and focus on one thing at a time. An enemy will attack your mind and your body at once, and you need to process both threats in parallel." "How?" "The hard way. I'm going to cast genjutsu on you while you maintain a sensing field." Your job is to break the illusion without losing your awareness of the surrounding environment. If you collapse the sensing field to focus on the genjutsu, I'll hit you. Physically. Naruto blinked. Hit me. Kurenai drew a kunai from her hip pouch and twirled it once around her finger. Training motivation. Every time your sensing field drops, I throw this at you, not at your head, probably. Probably. Motivation works best with a little uncertainty. Begin. Naruto closed his eyes and reached outward. The ravine bloomed into sensation around him, the cedars tall and slow with their ancient, patient chakra, the earth dense and quiet. A family of rabbits nesting about 30 meters to the east, their tiny signatures flickering like birthday candles. And Kurenai, bright and controlled and close, her chakra signature shifting as she prepared the genjutsu. He felt it coming before it hit, a ripple in her chakra, a subtle redirection of energy toward him. The genjutsu landed like a silk veil dropping over his perception, and suddenly, the ravine was different. The cedars were taller, the shadows deeper, and there was movement in the periphery. Shapes flitting between the trees that his sensing field told him weren't there. Two streams of information, contradicting each other. His eyes said movement, danger, threats closing in from all sides. His sensing said the ravine was empty except for Kurenai and the rabbits. Trust the sensing, he muttered to himself, and focused on holding both channels open. The effort was immediate and brutal, like trying to read two books at the same time. His brain wanted to commit to one input stream or the other, wanted to resolve the contradiction by picking a winner. The phantom shapes in the genjutsu rushed at him. He flinched, couldn't help it, and his sensing field stuttered. Something hard and metallic bit into the tree beside his head. Naruto's eyes snapped open. Kurenai's kunai was embedded in the cedar trunk about 3 inches from his left ear. Your field dropped for 2 seconds, Kurenai said. She was already holding another kunai. Again, he closed his eyes, extended the sensing field, felt the genjutsu descend again, different this time, not visual but auditory, filling the ravine with the sound of footsteps, dozens of them, coming from every direction. His sensing field said, empty. 2 signatures, nothing else. He held onto both. The footsteps grew louder, closer. His skin crawled with the animal instinct to move, to fight or flee, and his sensing field wobbled at the edges. The kunai thunked into the ground between his feet. 3 seconds that time, Kurenai said. Better. They went for 2 hours. By the end, Naruto was sitting on the ravine floor with his back against a rock, his head between his knees, and a splitting headache that pulsed behind his eyes like a second heartbeat. 7 kunai were scattered around his position. None had actually hit him, but 2 had come close enough to tear fabric. Kurenai was either an incredibly precise thrower, or she was genuinely willing to nick him for the sake of training. He suspected both. You held dual awareness for 47 seconds at your peak, Kurenai said, consulting a mental tally that Naruto was fairly certain she kept with frightening accuracy. That's not good enough for field use, but it's a foundation. Most shinobi never develop the ability at all. Most shinobi don't have a jounin throwing sharp objects at their face. Most shinobi don't blackmail their teachers. We all make choices. Naruto lifted his head and looked at her. She was collecting the scattered kunai, moving through the ravine with an economy of motion that spoke to years of practice. Every movement precise. Nothing wasted. Can I ask you something? He said. You're going to regardless of what I say. Your team. Hinata Kiba Shino. Do you train them like this? Kurenai paused mid-reach, her hand hovering over a kunai embedded in the dirt. No. Why not? She straightened up. Because they're genin who need to build confidence and fundamental skills. What I'm doing with you would break most students your age. The human brain isn't designed to process contradictory sensory inputs simultaneously. Forcing it to do so causes stress responses, headaches, nausea, disorientation. Long-term, it can cause psychological damage if the practitioner isn't resilient enough. And I'm resilient enough. Kurenai tucked the last kunai into her pouch. You have a regenerative factor that accelerates neural recovery. The headaches you're feeling right now would incapacitate a normal shinobi for days. You'll be functional by this afternoon. She looked at him directly. That's not a compliment. It's an observation about your biology. You can take more punishment than most people, which means I can push harder. That's the advantage we're exploiting. So I'm basically your crash test dummy. You're a student with unusual capabilities that require unusual methods. Don't be dramatic. Naruto stood up, wobbling slightly. The headache was already fading. She was right about the regeneration, though he'd never thought about it applying to brain function before. Those capabilities, he said carefully. The fox's chakra. You said it interacts with genjutsu. Have you figured out how? Kurenai crossed her arms and leaned against the ravine wall. Her expression shifted to something more contemplative, the sharp-edged instructor giving way to the analytical specialist. I have a theory, she said. Genjutsu works by inserting foreign chakra into a target's sensory processing system. The caster's chakra piggybacks on the target's own chakra pathways, feeding false information to the brain through the same channels the brain uses to interpret reality. Effective genjutsu is seamless because it uses the target's own system against them. Okay, but your system isn't normal. You have two chakra sources, your own and the fox's. They're intertwined but not identical. When genjutsu chakra enters your system, it has to navigate both streams simultaneously. The fox's chakra is hostile to foreign intrusion. It treats the genjutsu chakra as an invader and begins to reject it, the way a body rejects an incompatible blood transfusion. That rejection is what you feel as instinctive detection, the wrongness, the feeling that something is off. So the fox is protecting me from genjutsu. Not intentionally, it's more like an immune response, automatic, indiscriminate. The fox's chakra attacks the genjutsu because it attacks anything that isn't the fox. She paused, which creates an interesting possibility, which is, if we could teach you to modulate the fox's chakra response, to control the immune reaction rather than just letting it happen passively, you could potentially disrupt genjutsu at the moment of application, before the illusion even forms. Not breaking out of genjutsu, but preventing it from taking hold in the first place. Naruto stared at her. Is that possible? I don't know. It's never been tried because no one has ever trained a Jinchuriki in genjutsu theory before. Jinchuriki are weapons. They're trained to destroy, not to perceive. It never occurred to anyone to explore the intersection of tailed beast chakra and the subtler arts. Her eyes were bright with something that wasn't quite excitement, but was closer to excitement than anything Naruto had seen from her before. This is uncharted territory, Uzumaki. We're inventing the curriculum as we go. For a moment, the dynamic between them shifted. Not teacher and reluctant student, not blackmailer and hostage. Two people standing at the edge of something unknown, both leaning forward to see over the drop. Then Kurenai blinked, and the professional mask slid back into place. Tomorrow, we start modulation exercises. I want you to practice maintaining your sensing field tonight, 15-minute intervals, resting for 5 between each set. Don't push into the fox's chakra. That's a boundary we cross together, not one you explore alone. Naruto nodded. Kurenai, I told you not to. I'm not going to call you sensei, just Kurenai, he hesitated, searching for the right words. You're good at this. Teaching. The way you explain things, I actually understand them. That doesn't happen a lot for me. Kurenai's expression went through a complicated sequence of responses. Surprise, wariness, and then something that she locked away before he could identify it. Go home, Uzumaki, she said quietly. Eat something. Sleep. The first sign that things were changing outside the ravine came on day 6. Naruto was leaving Ikaraku's after a late lunch when he spotted Kakashi leaning against a fence post across the street, reading his orange book. Casual, relaxed, utterly unconvincing in his apparent aimlessness because Kakashi was never anywhere by accident. Yo. Kakashi said, not looking up from his book. Haven't seen much of you lately. Naruto kept his voice light. Been training. MMM. Early mornings, Sakura tells me, you've been gone before dawn most days this week. Since when does Sakura track my schedule? Since I asked her to. Kakashi turned a page. His visible eye flicked up over the edge of the book, sharp and assessing. You're moving differently, Naruto. Moving differently. Your posture's changed, less tension in the shoulders. Your eyes are tracking movement patterns. You scanned 3 civilian groups and 2 rooftop positions between Ikaraku's and here. You didn't used to do that. Naruto kept his face neutral. A week ago, he wouldn't have noticed Kakashi noticing. Now, thanks to Kurenai's relentless drills, he was hyper-aware of observation, both his own and others. Which was the problem, because the awareness itself was the tell. I've been working on situational awareness, he said. You always said I was too focused on what's in front of me. I did say that. Kakashi closed his book. Who's helping you? Direct question. No way around it without an obvious evasion, which Kakashi would read like a flashing sign. Naruto did what Kurenai had taught him. He told a truth that wasn't the truth. Shadow clones, he said. I set up 10 of them with different positions around a training area and practice tracking them. When they pop, I get the sensory memory back. It's like a feedback loop for awareness training. Kakashi considered this. It was plausible. It was the kind of creative, brute force solution Naruto was known for, and it leveraged his one undeniable strength: the shadow clone technique. More importantly, it was actually something he had been doing in addition to Kurenai's training, which meant if Kakashi tested the claim, it would hold up. Smart, Kakashi said. He sounded genuinely surprised, which stung more than it should have. I should have suggested something like that earlier. Yeah, Naruto thought, you should have. Well, keep it up. Kakashi reopened his book. We've got a mission briefing tomorrow afternoon. C-rank escort to the border of Hot Springs Country. Full team, don't be late. That's your line, sensei. Kakashi eye-smiled and vanished in a swirl of leaves. Show off. Naruto stood on the street for a long moment after he was gone. Hot Springs Country. That was where Kurenai's contact was based. Coincidence, probably. Missions to the border regions were common enough. But the timing prickled at him like a thorn caught in his sleeve. He needed to tell Kurenai about the mission. Not because it was necessarily connected to her investigation, but because she'd told him to report anything unusual, and a sudden mission assignment to the same country, her contact operated from qualified. The problem was contacting her. Their arrangement was strictly one way. She set the time and location for training, and he showed up. No dead drops from his end, no communication channels he could initiate. She designed it that way deliberately to minimize the trail between them. But Kurenai had also taught him to think creatively about constraints. Naruto walked to the commercial district and bought a potted plant from a street vendor. A small, unremarkable fern in a clay pot. He carried it home, set it on his windowsill next to the dying plant already there, and placed a folded piece of paper under the pot. The paper contained 6 words in their cipher. Hot Springs Mission. Tomorrow, need meet. Then he opened his window, the one facing northeast, toward the general direction of the Yuhai residence, and left it open. A signal. Their agreed-upon indicator that a message was waiting. Kurenai had established it during the cipher lesson as an emergency protocol, to be used only when the normal schedule was insufficient. He didn't know how often she checked. He didn't know if she'd see the open window before morning. All he could do was set the signal and wait. She came at midnight. Naruto was lying on his bed, not sleeping but not fully awake, drifting in that liminal space where his sensing ability seemed to sharpen on its own. The ambient chakra of the village at night was different from the daytime signature, quieter, deeper, like the difference between a river's surface chop and its undercurrent. He could feel the civilians in surrounding apartments as dim, steady glows. The occasional shinobi passing on the streets below registered as brighter, more defined points of light. When Kurenai's signature appeared at his window, he almost didn't recognize it. She'd suppressed her chakra so thoroughly that she was barely a whisper against the background noise. If he hadn't been specifically attuned to her frequency from days of close training, he would have missed her entirely. He sat up. She was perched on the windowsill in dark civilian clothes, her hair tied back, her face half-shadowed. She looked like a completely different person without the Jounin gear. "You used the emergency signal," she said, keeping her voice barely above a breath. "This had better be genuine. Kakashi assigned a mission tomorrow, C-rank escort to the border of Hot Springs country." Kurenai went very still. In the darkness, her red eyes caught the faint light from the street below and seemed to glow. "Tell me everything." Naruto recounted the conversation with Kakashi, the full team assignment, the escort classification, the border destination. Kurenai listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "Who's the client?" she asked when he finished. Kakashi didn't say, just said it was C-rank and the briefing was tomorrow afternoon. Standard escort to the Hot Springs border takes 4 to 5 days round trip. You'd be in the field for a week. Kurenai's jaw worked. My contact's next dead drop is scheduled in 6 days, on the Hot Springs side of the border. You think someone arranged this mission to put Team 7 near the drop point? I don't believe in coincidence. Not where this investigation is concerned. She shifted on the windowsill, and Naruto caught a flash of something in her expression, not fear, but a tightening, the look of someone recalculating variables and not liking the results. But I also think I might be paranoid. C-rank escorts to border regions are common. Your team is in the rotation. It could genuinely be routine. What do you want me to do? Kurenai was quiet for several seconds. Naruto could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes, risk assessments, contingency plans, the careful weighing of action against an action that was the unsexy core of real intelligence work. Go on the mission, she said finally. Behave normally. Complete the escort. But keep your sensing field active whenever you can manage it without arousing suspicion. If you detect anything unusual near the border, suppressed chakra signatures, surveillance, anything that feels like what you felt at Training Field 11, you note the location, the time, and the signature characteristics. Don't investigate, don't engage, just observe and remember. And if I find something, then we'll know we have a bigger problem than I thought. She stood on the windowsill, preparing to leave. One more thing. Kakashi noticed changes in your behavior. He told you as much. Yeah, he said I'm moving differently. You are. It's happening faster than I anticipated. The sensing training is bleeding into your physical comportment. You're more aware, which makes you calmer, which changes your body language. It's subtle, but Kakashi is one of the most observant shinobi in the village. If he's noticing, others will too. What do I do about that? Kurenai looked down at him. In the dim light, her expression softened by exactly 1 degree. You can't unlearn what you've learned. The changes are permanent, so you lean into the cover story, self-directed training with shadow clones. It's believable, it's consistent with your abilities, and it explains the improvement without implicating anyone else. Okay. And Uzumaki? She was framed in the window now, the night sky behind her, ready to drop into the darkness. Be careful on this mission. My father was careful too, and he still didn't come home. She vanished from the windowsill like she'd never been there. Naruto sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the silence she'd left behind. The mission briefing was in room 3 of the Hawkage Tower's administrative wing, a bland, windowless space that smelled like old paper and institutional tea. Naruto arrived on time. Sakura arrived 5 minutes early. Sasuke arrived exactly at the scheduled time because Sasuke treated punctuality the way other people treated oxygen, as a basic requirement not worth discussing. Kakashi arrived 20 minutes late, which was actually early by his standards. All right, Kakashi said, dropping a mission folder on the table without preamble. Standard C-rank escort. Our client is a textile merchant named Furukawa who needs to transport a shipment of silk to the Hot Springs border crossing. Valuable cargo, bandit-prone route, hence the shinobi escort. 3 days out, 1 day at the crossing for the client to complete his trade, 3 days back. Nothing complicated. Sakura opened the folder and scanned the contents. The route goes through the Kanabi Pass. That's been quiet lately, hasn't it? Mostly. There have been reports of bandit activity in the foothills, but nothing organized. Standard highway robbery, opportunistic rather than planned. Kakashi leaned against the wall. This should be straightforward. Good opportunity for field experience without undue risk. Naruto looked at the map in the folder. The route was marked in red ink, a winding path through forested highlands and mountain passes. The border crossing was a small trading post called Yumoto. He could see it marked at the terminal point of the route, right where Fire Country met Hot Springs Country, Yumoto. He filed the name away. "Questions?" Kakashi asked. "What's the threat assessment?" Sasuke said. His voice was flat, uninterested. A C-rank escort was beneath his attention, and he wasn't bothering to hide it. Low. But we treat every mission as if the assessment is wrong, because assessments are wrong more often than the intelligence division likes to admit. Kakashi straightened up. "We leave at dawn tomorrow. Standard field kit, 3 days provisions. Meet at the main gate at 0600. Naruto packed that evening with more care than he usually gave to mission preparation. Standard gear went into the pack first: rations, water purification tablets, bedroll, first aid kit. Then the less standard items. A small journal for recording observations, which he tucked into an inner pocket where it wouldn't be found in a casual search, and 3 soldier pills Kurenai had given him during training, for emergencies that require extended chakra use. He also spent 30 minutes practicing his sensing exercises, extending his awareness in controlled pulses, and then pulling it back, trying to make each extension quieter than the last. Kurenai's words echoed in his head, a whisper, not a shout. He was getting better. The pulses were smoother now, less ragged, and his range had increased incrementally each day. In the controlled environment of training, he could maintain a sensing field of about 300 meters for nearly 2 minutes before fatigue set in. In the field, with the distractions of travel and the need to appear normal, he'd be lucky to manage half that. But half was better than nothing. He slept poorly, woke before his alarm, and was at the main gate by 5:45. Sasuke was already there, leaning against the gate post with his pack slung over one shoulder, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Sakura arrived at 5:55, bright-eyed and organized, her medical pouch prominently displayed on her hip. She'd been studying with Tsunade's apprentice program, and the medical focus was starting to show in her kit choices. Kakashi materialized at 6:15. Nobody commented on it. 15 minutes late was practically a record. The textile merchant, Furukawa, was a round, nervous man in his 50s who sweated profusely despite the cool morning air and fussed over his cargo. 3 large crates of silk loaded onto a sturdy cart pulled by a pair of oxen. The oxen set the pace, which meant they wouldn't be moving fast. "Let's go," Kakashi said, and they went. The first 2 days were uneventful. They moved through Fire Country's interior at the oxen's lumbering pace, following a well-maintained trade road through mixed forest and farmland. Furukawa talked constantly about silk grades, trade prices, the unreliability of the Hot Springs merchants, the weather, his bad knee, his daughter's upcoming wedding. Naruto let the chatter wash over him like background noise and focused on his sensing exercises. He kept his awareness extended in short, controlled bursts. 5 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Quick enough that the sensing field wouldn't register to anyone monitoring for chakra fluctuations, frequent enough to build a running picture of their surroundings. The countryside was sparse, scattered civilian settlements, the occasional farmer working a field, wildlife moving through the tree cover. Nothing unusual, nothing suppressed or hidden. On the evening of the first day, they camped in a clearing off the main road. Kakashi took first watch. Naruto volunteered for second, which raised Sakura's eyebrows. He usually fought for any watch slot that wasn't the middle of the night one. "You feeling okay?" Sakura asked, rolling out her bedroll. "Fine, just not tired." Sakura gave him a look that suggested she didn't buy it, but wasn't interested enough to press. She settled into her bedroll with a medic's efficiency. asleep in under 3 minutes, her breathing evening out into the steady rhythm of someone who'd learned to rest on command. Sasuke was already asleep, or pretending to be. The Uchiha slept like he did everything else, with total commitment and zero apparent vulnerability. Naruto sat with his back to a tree, watching the fire die to embers, and extended his sensing field as far as he could push it. The forest at night was alive with small signatures, animals, insects, the slow pulse of the trees themselves. He pushed further, straining, reaching past the immediate surroundings into the deeper forest. Nothing. No hidden watchers, no suppressed signatures, no cold, still presence like the one at Training Field 11. Just the honest, messy, chaotic background chakra of the natural world. He should have been relieved. Instead, the absence nagged at him. Kurenai's paranoia was infectious. Kakashi appeared next to him at midnight, silent as a ghost, and Naruto managed not to flinch only because he'd felt the signature approaching. "Your watch," Kakashi said, settling down on the opposite side of the dying fire. He pulled out his book but didn't open it. In the ember light, his expression was impossible to read behind the mask. "Anything interesting? Quiet night. MMM." Kakashi sat there for a moment, not reading, not sleeping, just being present. It was unusual enough that Naruto felt his attention sharpen. "Naruto?" "Yeah, you've changed. Not just the awareness training, there's something else." Kakashi's voice was casual, unforced, the voice of a man making conversation over a campfire, but underneath it, there was a current, careful, probing. "You're carrying yourself like someone who has a purpose. That's not a bad thing. But I want to make sure the purpose is healthy." Naruto chose his words carefully. "I got tired of waiting for other people to decide I was worth investing in, so I started investing in myself." The words landed heavier than he'd intended. He saw Kakashi register the implicit accusation, "You invested in Sasuke, not me," and watched something complicated move behind that single visible eye. "That's fair," Kakashi said quietly. I know I haven't given you equal attention. There are reasons. I know the reasons. Sasuke's a flight risk. The Sharingan needs specialized guidance. The village has priorities." Naruto kept his voice even. No bitterness. Just facts. Kurenai's training had given him something unexpected, the ability to state hard truths without drowning in emotion. "I'm not angry about it, sensei. I just stopped waiting." Kakashi was quiet for a long time. The embers popped and settled. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. "I'm proud of you," Kakashi said. Naruto looked at him sharply. "I mean it. Self-directed improvement takes more discipline than following orders. Whatever you're doing, it's working." He paused. "But Naruto, if you ever need help with something, anything, I want you to know you can come to me." The offer was genuine. Naruto could hear it, and it cracked something open in his chest that he quickly sealed shut. Because the thing he needed help with was the one thing he couldn't share with Kakashi. Not now, maybe not ever. "Thanks, sensei," he said. "I'll remember that." Kakashi nodded, opened his book, and began to read. Within minutes, he was absorbed in it, or appeared to be. Naruto turned his attention to the dark forest and his watch, and the moment passed. But it stayed with him through the night, warm and complicated and aching. They reached the Kanabi Pass on the afternoon of the second day. The pass was a narrow corridor through a ridge of low mountains, the trade road threading between steep, forested slopes. It was beautiful in a postcard way, dramatic scenery, crisp mountain air, the kind of place that appeared on tourist brochures for Fire Country's wilderness regions. It was also, Naruto noted with his newly trained eye, a tactically terrible place to be escorting a slow-moving cart. The slopes on either side provided unlimited concealment for ambushers. The road was too narrow for evasive maneuvering. Line of sight was limited to about 100 meters in either direction by the curves in the pass. If someone wanted to hit a trade caravan, this was the place to do it. Kakashi had clearly reached the same conclusion because his posture shifted as they entered the pass. Nothing dramatic, his book stayed in his hand, his gait stayed casual, but Naruto could see the change in the way his eye moved, scanning rooftops that didn't exist, checking angles, cataloging cover positions. Naruto extended his sensing field. 5 seconds. 10. He pushed it to its limit, straining through the dense stone and heavy forest cover that made sensing harder than it was in open terrain. There. Not directly ahead, but on the slopes. 6 signatures spread across both sides of the pass in a rough V formation. Civilian-level chakra, weak, untrained. Bandits, not shinobi, they were poorly concealed, their chakra unmasked and agitated with what Naruto guessed was anticipation. He let his sensing field drop and casually moved up to walk beside Kakashi. 6 on the slopes. He said, keeping his voice at conversational level. 3 on each side, about 200 meters ahead. Civilians, not ninja. Kakashi's eye flicked to him. There was a pause, brief, charged, in which Naruto could practically see his sensei processing the fact that Naruto had just delivered a tactical sensing report with the casual precision of a seasoned chunin. You sense them, Kakashi said. Not a question. Yeah. Another pause. Questions stacking up behind Kakashi's mask, being consciously shelved for later. Professional priorities overriding personal curiosity. Sasuke, Kakashi said, barely raising his voice. Left slope. Sakura, stay with the client. Naruto, right slope. I'll take point. It was over in 90 seconds. Kakashi hit the road ahead of them with a killing intent pulse that froze 4 of the 6 bandits in their tracks. Sasuke blurred up the left slope with a speed that made the air crack, and Naruto sent 3 shadow clones up the right slope while he stayed below as a backstop. The bandits were exactly what his sensing had told him. Civilians with stolen weapons and bad ideas, not a real threat to a genin team, let alone one led by a jounin. They were tied up and left for the local authorities within minutes. Furukawa, who had spent the brief engagement hiding under his silk crates, emerged trembling and profusely grateful. Well handled, Kakashi said to the team as they resumed their march. Then, to Naruto specifically, your sensing range, how far? Depends on terrain. Open ground, maybe 300 meters. Dense cover like this, 200, and it's blurry. Since when? Recently. Kakashi studied him with an intensity that made Naruto's skin prickle. He could see the questions multiplying. Who taught you? How did you develop this? What else have you been learning in your pre-dawn training sessions? And he could see Kakashi choosing, deliberately, not to ask them. We'll talk about this when we get back to the village, Kakashi said. Sure. Naruto said, and hoped that by the time they returned, he'd have a convincing explanation prepared. They reached Yumoto on the afternoon of the 3rd day. The border crossing was a modest trading post straddling the line between Fire Country and Hot Springs Country. A cluster of buildings around a central market square, with a custom station manned by shinobi from both nations. The atmosphere was commercial and slightly seedy, the way border towns always were. Merchants, travelers, and the less reputable elements that gathered wherever goods changed hands. Furukawa immediately disappeared into the market to find his trading partners, leaving Team 7 with an afternoon and evening to wait. Kakashi assigned rotating watch on the cargo and told them to use the downtime for rest. Naruto used it for something else. He wandered the trading post with his hands in his pockets and his sensing field pulsing in quiet, regular intervals. To an observer, he was a bored teenager killing time. Underneath, he was mapping the chakra landscape of Yumoto with methodical precision. The border post was busier than it looked. Beyond the visible population of merchants and travelers, Naruto counted 14 shinobi-level signatures. 4 at the customs station, 2 Fire Country, 2 Hot Springs. 6 distributed around the market in what he guessed were plainclothes security positions. And 4 more that were harder to pin down. Moving through the crowds, pausing, moving again, not shopping, not trading, observing intelligence operatives. Had to be. The border was a natural choke point for information flow, and every hidden village worth its salt would have eyes and ears at every major crossing point. Naruto filed the observation and kept walking. He was looking for something specific. He wasn't sure what, but Kurenai had told him to note anything unusual, and the border post felt like a good place to look. He found it near the eastern edge of the trading post, where the buildings thinned out and the road continued into Hot Springs country. A small tea house, unremarkable except for the fact that its owner, a thin, sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, had a chakra signature that didn't match her civilian appearance. It was suppressed, yes, but not the suppression of a shinobi trying to hide. More like the residual signature of someone who had once been trained and had let the training lapse. A retired operative, maybe, or a deep-cover asset who'd been in place so long that their edge had dulled. The tea house had a small garden in the back. In the garden, there was a stone lantern. And at the base of the stone lantern, so faint that he almost missed it, Naruto's sensing field picked up a trace of residual chakra. Recent, hours old, not days. Someone had channeled a small amount of energy into the stone, like a signature or a marker, a dead drop site. Naruto bought a cup of tea, sat in the garden, and committed every detail to memory. The location, the residual signature characteristics, the tea house owner's chakra pattern. He didn't touch the lantern, didn't investigate further, just observed the way Kurenai had instructed and then left. On his way back to the team's position, he passed through the market square and almost collided with a man carrying a sack of grain. The man grunted an apology and moved on. Naruto barely registered it. His attention was already elsewhere, cataloging, processing. Then he stopped. The man's scent. Sweat and road dust and something else, something sharp and chemical. And beneath that, a chakra signature he'd felt before. Not here. Not on this trip. Weeks ago, in a moonlit clearing in the forest outside Konoha, Kurenai's contact, Naruto turned, scanning the crowd. The man was gone. Swallowed by the market throng like a stone sinking into water, his heart was hammering. He'd found the contact, or the contact had found him, which was a different and more troubling possibility. Either way, the man was here, at the border crossing, 6 days ahead of the scheduled dead drop. Something had changed. He needed to tell Kurenai. But Kurenai was 3 days away in Konoha, and he had no way to reach her. Think. What would Kurenai do? Observe, record, don't engage, don't investigate. But the contact was here, and something was wrong with the timeline, and Naruto's gut. That same instinct that had saved him a dozen times in his life was screaming that the something wrong was urgent. He spent the rest of the afternoon maintaining a passive sensing watch over the trading post, tracking the contact's signature as it moved through Yumoto. The man visited 3 locations: the tea house briefly, barely pausing, a merchant stall that sold writing supplies, and a boarding house on the north side of the trading post. He entered the boarding house and didn't come out. Naruto memorized the route, the timing, and the locations. Then he went back to Team 7's position and forced himself to eat dinner and make normal conversation and pretend that his brain wasn't running at 3 times its usual speed. "You're quiet," Sakura said over their campfire that evening. "Even for you lately. Just thinking." About what? About covert intelligence operations and dead drops, and a murdered Jounin and the woman who was teaching him to see the world as it really was. About how I want ramen and all we have is trail rations. Sakura rolled her eyes. Some things never change. More things are changing than you know, Naruto thought, and stared into the fire until the embers burned down to ash. They departed Yumoto the next morning with Furukawa's silk traded and his purse heavy. The return trip was uneventful, 3 days of walking, 1 brief rain squall, no bandits. Naruto spent the travel time practicing his sensing exercises and thinking. He'd seen something at Yumoto, something that didn't fit the expected pattern. The contact was early, the dead drop site showed recent activity, and the intelligence presence at the border crossing was heavier than a routine posting should warrant. None of it was conclusive. All of it was suggestive. They reached Konoha's gates in the late afternoon of the 7th day. Furukawa thanked them effusively, tipped generously, and waddled off toward the merchant district. Kakashi filed the mission report. Naruto went home, showered, changed, and opened his window. Kurenai came at 10 that night. She dropped through the window like a shadow given weight and stood in the center of his small apartment, her red eyes sweeping the room with the quick, comprehensive assessment that had become familiar to him over the past 2 weeks. Checking for changes, surveillance devices, signs of intrusion. Finding none, she turned to him. "Report," she said. Naruto told her everything. The sensing data from the journey, the bandit encounter in the pass, Kakashi's questions about his abilities. Then Yumoto, the tea house, the stone lantern, the residual chakra at the dead drop site, and the contact. Kurenai's expression didn't change during the recitation, but Naruto had spent enough time with her now to read the micro-reactions. The slight widening of her eyes when he described the dead drop site. The tightening of her hands when he mentioned the contact's presence. The brief, quickly suppressed flash of something that might have been fear when he noted the contact was 6 days early. "You're sure it was him," she said when he finished. "The same man from the forest. Same chakra signature, I'm certain. You didn't approach him." "No." "You told me to observe, so I observed." Kurenai sat down on the edge of his bed, which was the only available seating in the tiny apartment. She laced her fingers together and stared at the floor. "He's early because something spooked him," she said, half to herself. The dead drop schedule was set months ago. He wouldn't deviate unless he felt the timeline was compromised. Someone's onto him? Possibly, or someone's onto me, and he picked up the warning signs from his end. She looked up. "The intelligence presence you detected at the border. Could you characterize the signatures?" 4 that stood out. Mobile, disciplined, but not Anbu-level suppression. More like experienced chunin. Professional surveillance, not combat operatives. "Root," Kurenai said, and the word fell like a stone into still water. "What's root?" Kurenai's jaw tightened. She was quiet for several seconds, and Naruto could see her wrestling with how much to tell him. The balance between keeping him safe through ignorance and keeping him safe through knowledge. Knowledge won. Root is a subdivision of Anbu. Officially, it was disbanded years ago by the Third Hokage. Unofficially, it still operates under the command of a man named Danzo Shimura. She spoke the name the way someone might name a disease, clinical, precise, and with deep personal aversion. Danzo sits on the village council. He's one of the Hokage senior advisors, and he runs Root as his private intelligence and enforcement arm, answerable to no one but himself. "And he's connected to your father's death." Kurenai's eyes hardened. "My father's last mission was a routine deployment that took him through a region where Root was conducting unauthorized operations. He saw things he wasn't supposed to see. He reported them, through proper channels, to the Third Hokage." Her voice was controlled, but beneath the control, the furnace burned. 2 weeks later, he was dead. The mission that killed him was assigned through channels that Root controls. The deployment orders were buried in classified archives that only Root has access to. Naruto sat down on the floor across from her. The apartment was very quiet. Through the open window, he could hear the distant sounds of the village at night, music from a bar somewhere, the murmur of conversation, the ordinary sounds of people living their ordinary lives. "Danzo killed your father," he said. "Danzo ordered my father killed. Someone else pulled the trigger." Kurenai's hands were steady, but Naruto could feel her chakra fluctuating, tiny spikes of intensity that leaked through her normally perfect control. Emotion bleeding into the energy field. "I've spent a year trying to find the proof. The records, the authorization chain, the names of everyone involved. My contact in Hot Springs has been tracking down the documentation from the receiving end, the foreign operatives who were part of the unauthorized missions my father discovered. And now the contact is spooked and the timeline is blown." "Yes. What does that mean for us?" Kurenai looked at him. The us didn't go unnoticed. He saw it register, saw her instinct to correct it, to remind him that this was her mission, her risk, her problem, but she didn't. Whether because she'd accepted his involvement or because she was too tired to fight it, the correction never came. "It means we're running out of time," she said. If Root has detected anomalous activity at the border, they'll trace it back. They're methodical and patient, and they don't stop. My contact will go to ground he may already have. The records he was gathering may be lost, and if Danzo determines that I'm the source of the investigation, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Then we move faster, Naruto said. Kurenai studied him. In the dim light of his apartment, with the window open and the night air cool on their skin, something passed between them that wasn't part of any deal or arrangement. Call it recognition. Call it the moment when two people carrying separate burdens realize that the weight is lighter shared. You should walk away from this, Kurenai said. You know that. You're 16. This isn't your fight. You have your whole career ahead of you, and getting entangled in a conspiracy against one of the most powerful men in the village could destroy everything you've worked for. Everything I've worked for, Naruto repeated. You mean the career where nobody trains me, nobody takes me seriously, and I spend every day trying to prove I'm worth looking at? Kurenai flinched. Not from the words, from the truth behind them. I know what it's like, he said. To have the village take something from you and then tell you to be grateful for what's left. I know what it's like to carry something alone because nobody wants to hear it, and I know what it's like to be invisible. He met her eyes. I'm not walking away. Not because of the blackmail. Forget the blackmail. I'm not walking away because you're the first person who's actually looked at me and seen someone worth teaching. And if I let Danzo or Root or whoever else take that from me without a fight, then what's the point of any of it? The silence that followed was long and deep and full of things that neither of them was quite ready to say. Kurenai reached out and placed her hand on the top of his head. A brief contact, lasting maybe 2 seconds. The kind of gesture a teacher made with a student or an older sister with a younger brother. Simple, human, and entirely at odds with every hard edge she'd shown him since the night in the forest. You're an idiot, she said. I know. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably. And you can't even do a proper kai without blowing out every chakra sensor in a kilometer radius. Working on it. She almost smiled. Not quite. The muscles around her mouth shifted, and then the professional mask reasserted itself. But it was the closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her, and it felt like a victory more significant than any jutsu. Tomorrow morning, she said, standing. The ravine. Bring the journal. I want to see your observations from the mission, all of them. And we're accelerating the training schedule. If Root is watching, we need you combat-ready faster than I planned. How much faster? As fast as the fox will let us push. She moved to the window. Use Uzumaki. Yeah, the blackmail. Is it still on? Naruto looked at her for a long moment. The question was real. She was asking whether the threat still held, whether the original coercion that had brought them together was still the foundation of their arrangement. No, he said. It's been off since you told me about your father, probably before that. Kurenai nodded slowly. Then why are you still here? Because I want to be. She held his gaze for 3 heartbeats. Then she turned and dropped from the window into the night, and Naruto sat alone in his apartment, listening to the village breathe, and felt the shape of his world rearranging itself around a new center of gravity. Dawn came cold and clear, and Naruto was in the ravine before the first light touched the cedar canopy. Kurenai was waiting. She had the scroll from her contact spread across the flat rock, weighed down with stones at the corners. Next to it, she'd laid out a second scroll, her own notes, Naruto realized. Handwritten, densely packed, cross-referenced with dates and names and locations, the accumulated evidence of a year's worth of secret investigation. Sit, she said. He sat. I was up all night going through my contacts' interim findings against what you observed at Yumoto. Kurenai pointed to a section of her notes. The dead drop at the tea house, the residual chakra you detected, it shouldn't have been there. The protocol is clean drops, no chakra, no trace, nothing that a sensor could pick up. The fact that there was a residual signature means either my contact got sloppy or someone else accessed the site. Someone else. Root monitors dead drop locations as a standard counterintelligence practice. If they've identified the tea house as an active drop site, they would have placed their own monitoring seals. tiny chakra signatures designed to alert them when the site is used. Naruto thought back to the stone lantern, the faint trace of energy he'd detected. The signature I felt was recent but fading. Hours old, not fresh. If it was a monitoring seal, it was either malfunctioning or it was placed in a hurry. Or it was placed by someone who isn't as good as they think they are. Kurenai's expression was grim. Root operatives are well-trained, but they're not infallible. And they've been operating without oversight for so long that complacency creeps in. She rolled up the scrolls and tucked them away. This changes the training priorities. I was planning to spend another 2 weeks on sensing and genjutsu fundamentals before moving to applied skills. We don't have 2 weeks. We may not have one. What do you want to focus on? 3 things. First, your genjutsu disruption. We need to refine the fox's chakra interaction from passive immunity to active countermeasure. If Root engages us, their operatives will use genjutsu. You need to be immune. Second, chakra signature masking. You're too conspicuous. Your natural chakra output is enormous, which makes you easy to track. We need to teach you to dampen it. She paused. Third, and most important, I need to teach you how to lie. Naruto blinked. I know how to lie. You know how to tell untruths. That's not the same thing. Lying, at the level we need, is a full-body discipline. It's controlling your chakra fluctuations, your micro-expressions, your vocal patterns, your body language, all simultaneously, while under pressure, while being interrogated by people trained to detect deception. She fixed him with those red eyes. Can you do that? I'll learn. You'll have to. She stood. On your feet. We're starting with the fox. What followed was the most intense training session of Naruto's life. Not the most physically demanding. That honor still went to the Rasengan training with Jiraiya, which had left him unconscious multiple times. But the most mentally, emotionally, and spiritually grueling. Kurenai had him sit in the center of the ravine, eyes closed, and reach inward instead of outward. Past his own chakra, down into the deeper, hotter energy that churned in his gut. The fox. He'd touched this energy before, in moments of extreme stress. The fight with Haku on the bridge, when rage and grief had cracked the seal, and red chakra had poured through him like liquid fire. The fight with Neji, when desperation had opened the channel just enough to give him the edge he needed. But those had been reactive, the fox's power surging up to meet a crisis, not a controlled, deliberate interaction. Kurenai wanted deliberate. Don't try to use the fox's chakra, she said, kneeling in front of him. Don't draw on it, don't channel it, don't try to wield it. Just feel the boundary between your chakra and the fox's. Find the edge. Naruto went inward. His own chakra was a vast, turbulent ocean, blue-white, warm, chaotic. Below it, separated by something that felt like a membrane of concentrated will, the fox's chakra burned. Red-orange, dense, ancient. It didn't feel malicious, exactly. It felt wild, like a forest fire that wasn't angry at the trees it consumed. It just burned because burning was what it did. I can feel it, he said. The boundary, it's like a wall, my chakra on one side, the fox's on the other. Good. Now, gently, gently press against the boundary. Don't break it. Don't push through. Just press and feel how the fox's chakra responds. He pressed. The boundary flexed, and the fox's chakra surged against the other side like a wave hitting a seawall. Heat flooded through the membrane, not the destructive, overwhelming heat of the fox's rage, but a lower, slower warmth. Curiosity, almost, or attention. Something on the other side of the wall was noticing him. The fox's chakra just reacted, Naruto whispered. It's pressing back, not attacking. Just responding. That's the immune response I described. The fox's chakra instinctively reacts to foreign stimuli, including contact from your own consciousness, which it treats as partially foreign. Kurenai's voice was calm, guiding. Now. While you're maintaining that contact, I'm going to cast a genjutsu. Don't try to break it with Kai. Instead, I want you to direct the fox's response, the reactive pressure, outward through your own chakra system. Use the fox's energy to push the genjutsu out. That sounds really dangerous. It is. Great. Cool. Let's do it. The genjutsu hit him like a wave of cold water. Suddenly, the ravine was full of enemies, dark-cloaked figures closing in from all sides, blades drawn, killing intent radiating from every direction. His body screamed at him to move, fight, run. Instead, he held his ground and pressed against the boundary. The fox's chakra surged. He caught it, barely, like grabbing the tail of a whip mid-crack. Red-hot energy flooded up through his pathways, and he directed it outward, channeling the fox's reactive impulse through his own system instead of letting it burn wild. The genjutsu didn't break. It dissolved. Not shattered, not disrupted. Dissolved, like fog in sunlight, the illusory figures evaporating as the fox's chakra washed through his perception and burned away everything that wasn't real. Naruto opened his eyes. The ravine was empty. Kurenai was kneeling in front of him, and her expression was one he'd never seen before. Awe. Quickly controlled, quickly masked, but he'd seen it. Kurenai Yuhai, genjutsu master, one of the foremost illusionists in the village, had watched her technique dissolve like wet paper, and for one unguarded moment she had been awed. "How did that feel?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Like sunlight through a window. Clean, like—" he searched for the words. Like the genjutsu was never there at all. Because for a moment it wasn't. The fox's chakra didn't just break the illusion, it purged it from your system entirely. No residual effects, no lingering distortion. Complete nullification. She sat back on her heels. "I've never seen anything like that. I've studied genjutsu for 15 years, and I've never seen a countermeasure that total." "Is that the thing you talked about, the active countermeasure?" "It's beyond what I theorized. I thought we might achieve partial resistance, faster detection, easier breaks. This is immunity, true immunity. If you can learn to maintain that state," she trailed off, and Naruto could see her mind racing, running through implications and applications. "If you can maintain it passively, without conscious effort, you would be functionally immune to genjutsu. All genjutsu, including the Sharingan's visual techniques." The weight of that landed on both of them simultaneously. "That changes things," Naruto said. "That changes everything." Kurenai stood abruptly. "We need to practice this. We need to make it reflexive, automatic, and we need to understand its limitations, range, duration, whether it can extend to others through physical contact." She was pacing now, energized in a way he'd never seen from her. "If this works the way I think it works, you're not just a student, Uzumaki. You're a proof of concept. A demonstration that Jinchuriki can be more than weapons, that the tailed beast's chakra can be applied to the subtle arts in ways nobody has ever explored. You sound like a scientist." "I am a scientist. Every genjutsu specialist is." She stopped pacing and looked at him. "You realize what this means for the investigation? Root uses genjutsu, if I'm immune. Then their primary tool for controlling information, memory alteration, perception manipulation, interrogation techniques, doesn't work on you. You become the one person in the village they can't mind-wipe, can't deceive, can't manipulate through their standard methods." Her eyes were bright. "You become a witness they can't silence." The air in the ravine felt charged, electric. Something had shifted between them, not just the balance of their arrangement, but the shape of what was possible. What had started as a coerced teaching agreement had become something else entirely. A partnership, an investigation, and now, maybe, a weapon aimed at the people who'd murdered a good man and buried the truth under layers of classification and silence. Naruto stood up. His legs were shaky, and the fox's chakra still hummed through his system like a low-grade electrical current, but he felt alive in a way he couldn't remember feeling before. "Kurenai." "What?" "Thank you for teaching me." She looked at him for a long moment. The morning light was filtering through the cedar canopy in thin, golden beams, and one of them caught her face, illuminating the sharp angles and the deep red of her eyes. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We're just getting started." They trained for another 3 hours, pushing the fox chakra genjutsu immunity through increasingly rigorous tests. Kurenai hit him with everything in her arsenal, layered illusions, sensory overrides, even a technique she called the bringer of darkness. That plunged his entire visual field into absolute blackness. The fox's chakra burned through all of them, though the more powerful techniques took longer to dissolve and required more conscious direction. By the end, Naruto was exhausted in a way that was entirely new, not physical fatigue, not even mental fatigue, but something deeper. A spiritual weariness, as if the boundary between his chakra and the fox's had been flexed so many times that it was sore. That's enough for today, Kurenai said, and he was grateful for it. They sat on the flat rock together. Not close, Kurenai maintained her physical distance, but the emotional distance had narrowed. The silence between them was comfortable now, companionable. Not friends, she'd said on that first night, not bonding. But something was growing in the space between those prohibitions, something neither of them was naming. "There's something I need to tell you," Kurenai said, and her voice had shifted again. Softer. Vulnerable in a way she never allowed herself to be during training, Naruto waited. "Asuma has been asking about my schedule, where I go in the mornings, why I've been distracted." She stared at her hands. "I've been lying to him, inventing excuses. He knows I'm lying. Asuma isn't stupid, but he hasn't pushed. Yet." Asuma-sensei. Naruto knew the relationship existed. It was one of the worst-kept secrets in Konoha's Jounin Corps, but he'd never heard Kurenai reference it directly. "He's the one person in this village I trust completely, and I'm deceiving him every day." Her voice was flat, controlled, but the flatness itself betrayed the pain underneath. "Because the truth would put him in danger, and because the truth involves his father." Naruto went cold. "The third Hokage," my father reported what he found to the third, Hiruzen Sarutobi. He trusted the Hokage to act on the information, to hold Danzo accountable. Her hands tightened in her lap. "The third chose the village over justice. He buried the report. He let Danzo handle the problem, and my father paid for the third Hokage's pragmatism with his life." The implications cascaded through Naruto's mind. The third Hokage, the old man who had given Naruto his apartment, his stipend, his enrollment in the academy. The man who had visited him on his birthdays and told him stories about the will of fire. The closest thing to a grandfather Naruto had ever known, that man had knowingly allowed Danzo to murder Kurenai's father. "If Asuma finds out," Naruto said slowly, "he has to confront what his father did." "Yes, and that could destroy him." "Yes," Kurenai's voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. "So I lie, to protect him, to protect the investigation, to protect myself from having to watch the man I love learn that his father was complicit in murder." She exhaled. "And every lie costs a little more." Naruto didn't have words for what he was feeling. The ground beneath his assumptions was shifting. The third Hokage, the kindly old man, the protector of the village, had made a choice that resulted in a good man's death. Not out of malice, out of pragmatism. Out of the cold calculus of village security that weighted some lives heavier than others, and Naruto's own life had been shaped by that same calculus. The Jinchuriki, the weapon, the container, tolerated because useful, ignored because inconvenient. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it in more dimensions than Kurenai could know. "I don't need sorry," she said, and her voice was firm again, the vulnerability sealed away. "I need results. I need the records my contact was gathering. I need proof that can't be buried and leverage that can't be silenced. And I need to do it before Root closes the net." She stood up. "We train again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Bring everything you've got." She started to walk away, then turned back. "And Uzumaki, Naruto." He looked up. She'd never used his first name before. "You asked me on the first day why I was out in the forest. I told you it wasn't part of our arrangement." She paused. "It isn't. You're part of it because you choose to be. That's different from anything I expected, and it's worth more than I know how to say right now." She turned and climbed out of the ravine without waiting for a response. Naruto sat on the rock, listening to her footsteps fade, and felt the weight of their shared secret settle more firmly onto his shoulders. Heavier now, but somehow easier to carry. He tipped his head back and watched the cedar branches sway against the sky. Somewhere in the village, Danzo Shimura was going about his day. attending council meetings, directing route operations, pulling the strings of an intelligence network that had been silencing inconvenient truths for decades. He didn't know that a 16-year-old Jinchuriki was learning to see through his illusions. He didn't know that the daughter of a man he'd murdered was no longer hunting alone. Naruto smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to become a very big problem for some very dangerous people, and who was completely at peace with that. He climbed out of the ravine and headed home. There was training tomorrow, and a conspiracy to unravel, and a teacher he was going to be worthy of if it killed him. And somewhere deep in his gut, behind the boundary, behind the seal, the fox stirred in its sleep and rumbled a sound that might have been interest. Chapter 3. The name on the wall rain hammered Konoha for 3 straight days after Naruto returned from the hot springs mission. The kind of rain that turned the village streets into shallow rivers and kept most sensible people indoors, hunched over tea and waiting for the sky to remember what sunshine was. Naruto trained through all of it. The ravine became a different beast in the rain. Water cascaded down the rocky walls in sheets, turning the floor into ankle-deep mud that sucked at his sandals with every step. The cedar canopy, so effective against aerial surveillance, was useless against the vertical deluge. Within minutes of arriving each morning, Naruto was soaked to the bone, shivering and miserable. Kurenai didn't care. "Rain is useful," she said on the first morning, standing under the downpour as if it were a mild inconvenience rather than a biblical event. Her hair was plastered to her face, her clothes heavy with water, and she hadn't so much as flinched. It masks sound, disrupts scent tracking, and creates ambient chakra interference from the water cycle. If you can maintain your sensing field in this, you can maintain it anywhere. "And if I drown, then your sensing field won't matter." She worked him harder than ever. The rain sessions combined everything they'd been building: sensing, genjutsu detection, the fox chakra immunity, chakra signature suppression, and a new element that Kurenai introduced on the second rainy morning: tactical movement. "Stop thinking of yourself as a brawler who can also sense things," she told him, moving through the mud with an agility that seemed to mock the terrain. "Start thinking of yourself as a sensor who can also fight. The difference matters. A brawler charges in. A sensor chooses where and when and how to engage, because a sensor always knows more than the enemy." She taught him to use his sensing field as a tactical tool, reading the environment, mapping terrain through chakra reflection, identifying cover positions and escape routes without line of sight. She had him navigate the ravine blindfolded, using only his sensing ability to avoid obstacles and track her movements. She threw kunai at him in the rain, and he learned to feel the displaced air and the faint chakra residue on the metal and dodge before the blade arrived. It was brutal, exhausting, and exhilarating. On the third morning, the rain broke. Pale sunlight filtered through the cedars, and steam rose from the wet earth like the forest was exhaling. Naruto arrived at the ravine to find Kurenai sitting on the flat rock with a map spread across her knees and a look on her face that he'd learned to associate with something going wrong. "What happened?" he said, dropping down from the rim. "My contact missed his check-in." Naruto went still. The contact, the weathered man from the forest, the one he'd spotted at Yumoto, operated on a rigid communication schedule. Missed check-ins were protocol for only 2 situations. The operative had been compromised or the operative was dead. "How late?" Naruto asked. 48 hours. "The fallback window closes tonight." Kurenai's voice was steady, but her hands on the map were white-knuckled. "If he doesn't make the fallback, we have to assume he's been taken, which means Root has the information he was carrying. Which means they know what I've been looking for and how close I've gotten." Naruto sat down across from her. "What can we do?" The records he was gathering, copies of mission files, deployment orders, the authorization chain for my father's last assignment, those were our primary evidence trail. Without them, we have my contact's interim findings. She tapped the scroll she always carried. Fragmentary. Suggestive but not conclusive, not enough to build a case that could survive challenge. There has to be another way to get the records. Kurenai was quiet for a moment, then she looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts calculation and reluctance. There is, she said. The original files still exist. They have to. Danzo is meticulous about documentation. He records everything because records are power. The files my contact was trying to copy from external archives are duplicates. The originals are here in Konoha. Where? The Konoha Central Archives. Underground Level 3. The classified section that requires council-level clearance to access. Naruto stared at her. You want to break into the village archives. I want to access the archives legally, under cover of a legitimate reason that won't trigger security protocols. She folded the map. And I think I know how. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, which was what made Naruto nervous. In his experience, simple plans had a way of becoming complicated the moment they contacted reality. Kurenai explained it during their morning session, alternating between tactical briefing and physical drills in a way that kept Naruto's body working while his mind processed. The classified section of the archives is accessible to Jounin for mission-related research, she said, circling him while he maintained a blindfolded sensing field. But access is logged, scrutinized, and reported to the Intelligence Division. If I walk in and request files related to my father's last mission, a flag goes up within the hour. So you can't go. Correct. But there's a workaround. The archives also serve an educational function. Academy instructors and senior shinobi regularly bring students to the upper levels for history lessons and research projects. The classified section is off-limits during these visits, but the security protocols relax throughout the entire archive complex when educational groups are present. More people moving through the system means more noise in the logs. Naruto caught a kunai she'd thrown from his left. He was getting better at the rain-trained reflexes, even without the blindfold, and nodded. You want to use an educational visit as cover? Not just any visit. I've already arranged one. Kurenai's voice carried the faintest edge of satisfaction. I spoke to the mission assignment desk yesterday and volunteered Team 8 for a supplementary research project on historical mission analysis. Shino and Kiba will spend the morning in the upper archives researching completed missions for a tactical review exercise. Hinata will assist. Standard educational fare, nobody questions it. And while your team is in the upper levels creating noise in the system, you and I go down. I've forged a research authorization under a retired Jounin's credentials, a man named Heihachi who passed away 6 months ago. His clearance hasn't been deactivated in the system yet because the archive's administrative staff is chronically understaffed and updates are backlogged. The authorization will get us into the classified section. We find the files, copy them, and get out before anyone realizes the access credentials belong to a dead man. Naruto pulled off the blindfold. That's a lot of moving pieces. Every covert operation has moving pieces. The skill is in making sure they move in the right order. She paused. There's a risk I need you to understand. The classified section has its own security, not just locks and protocols, but monitoring seals embedded in the infrastructure. They detect unauthorized chakra use. If we use any active techniques down there, sensing, genjutsu, anything that channels chakra, the seals will flag it. So we go in dark, no chakra. Exactly, which means no Fox immunity, no sensing field, no safety net. Just 2 people with forged credentials walking into one of the most secure locations in the village and hoping nobody looks too closely. Naruto thought about it. The risk was enormous. Getting caught in the classified archives with forged credentials wouldn't just end Kurenai's investigation, it would end her career. Possibly her freedom. And Naruto, as an accomplice, would face the same consequences, but the alternative was letting Root win. Letting the records stay buried, the truth stay hidden, and Kurenai's father stay unavenged. When? He asked. Day after tomorrow. I need time to finalize the forged authorization and brief Team 8 on the research project without revealing the real purpose. Your team doesn't know? No. And they can't. The less they know, the safer they are. Kurenai's expression was firm, but Naruto caught the shadow of guilt behind it. Using her own students as unwitting cover was costing her something, even if she'd never admit it. "I'll be ready," Naruto said. "One more thing." Kurenai pulled a small cloth bundle from her equipment pouch and tossed it to him. Inside were a pair of thin leather gloves and a vial of clear liquid. "The gloves prevent fingerprint traces on any documents we handle. The liquid is a chakra-dampening compound. Apply it to your hands and forearms before we go in. It suppresses residual chakra emissions from your skin, which is important because your baseline chakra output is high enough to trip the monitoring seals even without active technique use." Naruto held up the vial. "Where did you get this?" "I made it. Genjutsu specialists learn applied chemistry as part of their training. Many of the compounds we use to enhance or sustain illusions have secondary applications." She looked at him. "Put the gloves on now. Practice moving in them. You need to be able to handle documents and scrolls with the same dexterity as bare hands. Any fumbling in the archives is time we can't afford to waste." He pulled on the gloves. They were well made, thin enough that he could feel texture through the leather, snug enough that they wouldn't slip or catch on anything. He flexed his fingers, picked up a kunai, flipped it. The gloves barely registered. "Good," Kurenai said. "Now blindfold back on." We're not done with today's session. Naruto spent the rest of that day and the next in a state of controlled anxiety that he masked with aggressive normalcy. He ate ramen at Ikaraku's. He trained with shadow clones at his usual spots. He showed up for a team meeting with Kakashi and listened to a debriefing on the Hot Springs mission with appropriate levels of attention. The one crack in his performance came on the afternoon before the archive operation, when he ran into Shikamaru Nara outside the equipment supply shop. Shikamaru was leaning against the wall in his characteristic slouch, watching clouds with the dedication of a man who had elevated laziness to an art form. He glanced at Naruto as he passed, and something in that glance snagged. "You look like a man with a plan," Shikamaru said. Naruto stopped. "What?" "You've got that face, the one you get before you do something troublesome." Shikamaru yawned. "It's the same face you had before you challenged Neji and before you went after Gaara. Like you've already decided what you're going to do and you're just waiting for the clock to tick down." Of all the people in Konoha to run into on the day before a covert archive infiltration, Shikamaru Nara was possibly the worst. The boy's analytical mind was a machine that ran constantly, processing data that most people didn't even register as data. Naruto could fool Kakashi with a plausible cover story. He wasn't sure he could fool Shikamaru with anything. "Just training stuff," Naruto said, keeping his voice casual. "You know me, always itching for the next thing." Shikamaru studied him with those half-lidded eyes that saw everything and pretended to see nothing. "Yeah," he said, "I know you." A pause. "If whatever you're planning gets complicated, you know where to find me. I'm not planning anything." "Sure." Shikamaru pushed off the wall and ambled away, hands in his pockets. "But if you were, and if it went sideways, I'd rather get the call before the mess than after. Just putting that out there." He rounded the corner and was gone. Naruto stood in the street, heart beating a little too fast, and filed the interaction away under "problems I'll deal with later." The morning of the operation dawned clear and cool. Naruto applied the chakra-dampening compound to his hands and forearms in his apartment, watching the clear liquid absorb into his skin and feeling the strange, muted sensation it produced, like his chakra pathways had been wrapped in cotton. The compound didn't suppress his chakra entirely, but it dulled the ambient output to levels that would read as civilian to monitoring seals. He pulled on the leather gloves, dressed in nondescript civilian clothes, Kurenai's instruction. Shinobi gear in the archives would draw attention, and left his apartment at 7:30. The Konoha Central Archives occupied a large, utilitarian building in the administrative district, sandwiched between the Intelligence Division headquarters and the Cipher Corps facility. It was not an attractive building. It was, in fact, aggressively ugly. A squat rectangle of reinforced concrete with small windows, and a single public entrance flanked by 2 Chunin guards who checked credentials with the bored thoroughness of people who perform the same task 8 hours a day. Naruto arrived first, as planned. He loitered near a tea vendor across the street, sipping a cup of cheap green tea and watching the archive's entrance. At 7:45, Team 8 appeared. Kurenai led her students up the steps with the casual authority of a jounin on routine business. Kiba was complaining about something. Naruto could hear the cadence of his voice even from across the street, though not the words. Shino walked in silence, his high collar hiding whatever expression he wore. Hinata was slightly behind the others, her posture careful, her pale eyes scanning the street, her gaze passed over Naruto without recognition. Civilian clothes, no headband, the dampening compound muting his chakra signature, he might as well have been a different person. She looked away, and Team 8 disappeared into the building. Naruto counted to 300. 5 minutes. Enough time for Kurenai to get her team settled in the upper archives, establish the educational cover, and make her way to the rendezvous point. He crossed the street, climbed the steps, and presented himself to the guards. "Research visit," he said, holding up the forged authorization scroll Kurenai had prepared. It bore the name of Heihachi Kenji, retired jounin, and carried a convincing approximation of his personal seal. The authorization specified access to the classified section for historical mission analysis related to ongoing tactical instruction. The guard on the left took the scroll, examined it, and ran it through a validation seal embedded in the desk. The seal glowed green. Valid credentials, recognized name, appropriate clearance level. "Heihachi-san's assistant?" the guard asked, barely looking up. "Research aide," Naruto said. "He's already inside." The guard stamped a visitor pass and handed it across the desk. "Level 3 is down the central stairway, 3rd door on the left. Don't remove any documents from the classified section. Copies can be made at the reproduction station inside. Sign out when you leave." "Thank you." He walked into the archives, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The building was climate-controlled, necessary for document preservation. And the interior was a warren of corridors, reading rooms, and storage vaults that smelled of old paper and binding glue. The upper levels were well lit, with large windows and reading tables where a handful of shinobi and civilian researchers sat working. Normal, unremarkable, Naruto found the central stairway and descended. The lower levels were different. The lighting shifted from fluorescent to the warm amber of preservation lamps. The corridors narrowed. The doors changed from standard wood to reinforced steel with ceiling arrays etched into the frames. Each level had its own security checkpoint, a desk, a guard, a validation seal. Level 1, Mission Archives, open access. The guard waved him through. Level 2, Intelligence Reports, restricted access, another validation of his credentials, green light. Through Level 3, Classified Operations, Council-level clearance. The guard here was different, not a bored chunin, but a sharp-eyed Tokubetsu jounin who examined the authorization scroll with the focus of someone who actually cared about doing their job correctly. "Heihachi Kenji," the guard read. "I know the name. Retired last year, didn't he? 6 months ago." Naruto said, keeping his voice neutral. "He's been doing consulting work for the Tactical Instruction Program. This is part of a historical case study he's developing." The guard grunted and ran the scroll through his validation seal. Green light. But instead of waving him through, the guard looked up and met his eyes. "You're young for a research aide." "I'm thorough for a research aide," Naruto said, and smiled. The Naruto smile, open, disarming, slightly stupid. The smile that had been getting him past obstacles since he was 12 years old, because people saw it and categorized him as harmless. The guard held his gaze for one more second, then stamped the pass and jerked his thumb toward the heavy steel door behind him. "No active chakra use inside. No removal of documents. The reproduction station is in the east alcove. You have 2 hours." Naruto pushed through the door and entered the classified section. It was smaller than he'd expected. A single large room, low-ceilinged, lined floor to ceiling with shelved scroll cases and document boxes. Each shelf was labeled with a classification code and date range. The air was dry and still, preserved by ceiling arrays that maintained constant temperature and humidity. A reproduction station, basically a desk with specialized copying scrolls, sat in an alcove to the right. Kurenai was already there. She was standing at a shelf near the back of the room, her body angled to block the security camera mounted in the ceiling corner. She'd changed from her jounin gear into civilian clothes similar to Naruto's, and her hair was pinned up under a cloth wrap that altered her silhouette enough to defeat casual recognition. "Credentials worked," Naruto said, keeping his voice low. "The cameras cycle on a 90-second rotation. We have blind spots of approximately 3 seconds between sweeps." Kurenai spoke without turning around. "I've located the section. Classified operations, year 37 to 39. My father's last mission was in year 38. She pulled a scroll case from the shelf, opened it. Inside were dozens of tightly rolled mission scrolls, each sealed with a classification stamp and a reference number. "I need reference number CO 38 to 2274, she said. "That's the mission file. But I also need CO 38 to 2270 through 2273, the 4 missions that preceded it. Those should show the pattern of deployment that led to his assignment." They worked quickly and silently. Naruto found the reference numbers while Kurenai handled the scrolls, her gloved hands moving with practiced precision. She unrolled each scroll just far enough to confirm the contents, then carried it to the reproduction station and pressed it against the copying scroll. The copy process was mechanical, not chakra-based, a relief, given the monitoring seals, and took about 30 seconds per document. CO 38 to 2270. A border patrol assignment. Standard deployment, standard duration. Nothing unusual. CO 38 to 2271. An intelligence-gathering mission in the land of rivers. Single operative deployment, which was unusual for an intelligence mission. Standard protocol called for 2-person teams. CO 38 to 2272. Another border patrol. But the deployment location was different from the first, farther east, closer to the region where Root's unauthorized operations were concentrated. CO 38 to 2273. Classified reconnaissance. The mission description was heavily redacted, with entire paragraphs blacked out. But the authorization chain was visible. The mission had been approved not through the standard Hawkage's office channel, but through Special Advisory Division, a bureaucratic euphemism that Kurenai identified with a single whispered word. Root, and then CO 38 to 2274. The last mission. The one that killed Kurenai's father. Kurenai unrolled the scroll, and Naruto watched her face go very still. The mission file was comprehensive deployment orders, tactical briefing, team composition, route planning, threat assessment. Standard format, standard language. A reconnaissance patrol through contested territory in the northeast border region. 4-person team led by Jounin Yuhai Shinku, Kurenai's father, but the deployment was wrong. Even Naruto, with his limited experience, could see it. The route went directly through a region flagged in the threat assessment as active hostile territory, engagement probability high. The team composition was light, 4 shinobi for a mission that the threat assessment suggested warranted 6 to 8. And the support plan was non-existent. No extraction protocol, no backup deployment, no medical response team on standby. Someone had sent 4 shinobi into a kill zone without backup and called it a routine patrol. Kurenai copied the scroll without a word. Her hands were steady. Her face was a mask. But her eyes, those vivid red eyes, burned with a fury so contained it was almost invisible. Almost. "There's more," she whispered, pulling a second document from behind the mission scroll. A smaller scroll, tucked into the back of the case as if it had been added after the fact. "This isn't part of the standard file." She unrolled it. It was a single page, a memorandum handwritten, bearing a seal that Naruto didn't recognize. The text was brief. Subject: Resolution of Operational Security Concern, Sector NE-7 Authorization. Special Advisory Division, Priority Alpha Action Taken. Deployment CO 38 to 2274 structured to achieve organic resolution of identified security concern. Asset exposure neutralized through operational attrition. No further action required. DS, Kurenai's breath caught. A tiny sound, barely audible, but in the silence of the classified archives it was deafening. DS, Danzo Shimura. Organic resolution, Naruto said, reading over her shoulder. Operational attrition. The euphemisms were thin as rice paper, and what they concealed was murder. Planned, documented, authorized murder of a Konoha Jounin by someone within his own village's command structure. He wrote it down. He actually wrote it down. Because records are power. Kurenai whispered, echoing what she'd said before. Danzo documents everything, even this, especially this. Her hands were trembling now, the gloves making the tremor more visible against the pale scroll paper. This is the proof. Not circumstantial, not inferred, not reconstructed from fragments. This is Danzo's own authorization, in his own hand, confirming that he engineered my father's death. She copied it, twice for redundancy. Then she replaced the originals exactly as they'd found them, scroll for scroll, case for case, with a precision born of discipline and white-hot rage. "We need to go," Naruto said. He could feel the time pressure like a physical weight. They'd been in the classified section for nearly 40 minutes, and the 2-hour window was generous but not infinite. One more thing. Kurenai moved to a different shelf. Authorization records. The Special Advisory Division has its own filing system down here, separate from the standard mission archives. If Danzo documented the kill order, he documented the chain that led to it, including any communications with the Hawkage's office. She found the section and pulled a heavy document box from the shelf. Inside were rows of thin scrolls, each tagged with a date code. She flipped through them quickly, scanning dates. Here, she pulled one free. Dated 2 weeks before my father's last mission. Outgoing communication from the Special Advisory Division to the Hawkage's Advisory Council. Subject line: Personnel Action, Operational Security. She unrolled it. Naruto read it with her. The document was a formal request from the Special Advisory Division, from Danzo to the Hawkage's Advisory Council, requesting authorization for personnel action to resolve an identified security breach in Sector NE-7. The language was bureaucratic and vague, but the meaning was clear. Danzo was asking permission to eliminate the person who had discovered Root's unauthorized operations. The response was at the bottom. A single line, in handwriting that Naruto recognized from years of academy ceremonies and formal addresses: approved. Handle through operational channels. Minimize visibility. HS, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The third Hawkage, Kurenai, stared at the document. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. For a long, terrible moment, she was a statue carved from something harder than stone. Then she copied it, replaced the original, and closed the box. Her movements were mechanical, precise. The movements of a woman operating on training and discipline because everything else had been burned away. "We're done," she said. "Let's go." They exited the classified section. The Tokubetsu Jounin guard checked their passes, logged their departure time, and nodded them through. They climbed the stairs in silence, moved through the upper levels where Team 8 was still working at their research tables. Naruto caught a glimpse of Kiba arguing with Shino over a scroll, Hinata taking careful notes, and emerged into the morning sunshine. The brightness was almost painful after the preserved dimness of the archives. Naruto squinted, his eyes watering, and fell into step beside Kurenai as they walked away from the building at a pace that was carefully calibrated to be unhurried. They didn't speak until they were 3 blocks away, in a narrow alley between a bookshop and a dried goods store, out of sight and earshot. Kurenai leaned against the wall and pressed her palms over her eyes. Naruto stood in front of her and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The document in the archives had confirmed the worst thing she'd feared. Not just that Danzo had killed her father, but that the third Hokage had known, had approved, had signed off on the murder of a loyal Jounin to protect a secret that should never have existed. I knew. Kurenai said, her voice muffled behind her hands. I suspected. I told myself I was prepared for it. I thought I'd made peace with the possibility. She dropped her hands. Her eyes were dry, red, vivid red, and absolutely devastated. I wasn't prepared. Naruto reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. A simple contact. Not enough and not the right shape, but the only thing he had. Kurenai looked at his hand, then at his face. Something passed between them, not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement. The acknowledgement of one person carrying too much to another person willing to help carry it. We need to move, she said, straightening up. The copies are in my bag. I need to get them to a secure location before. She stopped. Naruto felt it a fraction of a second later and cursed himself for the delay. The dampening compound on his skin was still suppressing his sensing ability, and by the time the presence registered, it was close. Very close. On the rooftop above them, at the mouth of the alley, somewhere in the peripheral shadows. Not one presence, 3 suppressed chakra, cold, still, professional. Kurenai, Naruto said. I feel them. The alley suddenly felt very narrow. Kurenai's hand moved to her hip, where her kunai pouch would have been if she'd been wearing her Jounin gear. She wasn't. Civilian clothes, no weapons, no gear. Naruto was similarly unarmed. They'd come to the archives dressed as researchers, and researchers didn't carry combat equipment. The copies, Kurenai breathed. They want the copies. Can we run? Not faster than Anbu-level operatives. The presence at the mouth of the alley solidified. A figure stepped into view, dark clothes, a blank mask, the standard-issue uniform of Konoha's Black Ops division, but the mask was wrong. Standard Anbu masks depicted animals. This mask was featureless. Smooth, white, empty root. Yuhai Kurenai, the operative said. The voice was flat, genderless, stripped of everything that made a voice human. You are instructed to surrender all materials removed from the Konoha Central Archives and submit to debriefing at a secure location. Resistance is inadvisable. Kurenai's posture shifted. Despite the civilian clothes, despite the lack of weapons, she transformed in an instant from a woman in an alley to a Jounin of Konoha. The change was in her spine, her shoulders, the angle of her chin. A predator recognizing a threat and deciding to be a threat right back. On whose authority? She said, that information is classified. Everything about you is classified. That's the problem. The operative tilted his head, a tiny movement mechanical. The boy, Uzumaki Naruto. His presence here is noted and will be reported. Step away from the subject, Uzumaki. This matter does not concern you. Naruto moved to stand beside Kurenai, not behind her, beside her. Yeah, it does, he said. The second operative dropped from the rooftop and landed behind them, blocking the far end of the alley. The third presence remained hidden, a reserve, covering escape routes. Standard 3-person containment formation. Textbook route tactics. According to the tactical briefings Kurenai had been feeding him for the past 2 weeks, 3 route operatives. 2 unarmed targets. No weapons, no gear, and the dampening compound still suppressing their chakra. Bad odds. Very bad odds. Kurenai's hand brushed against his. A deliberate touch, brief and precise. A signal. He felt something transfer between their skin, a tiny pulse of chakra, breaking through the dampening compound like a needle through cloth. A message encoded in sensation rather than words. Follow my lead. Kurenai raised her hands. I'll come with you, she said, her voice calm and compliant. There's no need for this to become difficult. The operative at the mouth of the alley stepped forward. The materials, in my bag. Kurenai reached slowly for the satchel at her hip. Let me, she moved, not fast, instant. One moment she was reaching for the bag. The next, her hand was at her mouth, and she bit down on her own thumb hard enough to draw blood. The blood was the catalyst, a biological component that bypassed the monitoring seal's chakra detection because it wasn't a technique. It was a physical trigger for a pre-prepared genjutsu woven into her own circulatory system. The alley exploded with illusion. Naruto had experienced Kurenai's genjutsu dozens of times in training. He knew her style, her signatures, the particular flavor of her illusions. But he'd never felt her cast at full combat power without restraint, and the difference was staggering. The world broke. The alley walls melted, reformed, twisted into a labyrinth of impossible geometry. The ground became the ceiling. Gravity reversed, righted itself, reversed again. The two visible operatives froze, not from choice but from neurological overload, their brains struggling to process input that violated every physical law they knew. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. Root operatives were trained against genjutsu, and these were no exception. But 4 seconds was enough. Run! Kurenai grabbed Naruto's arm and hauled him toward the mouth of the alley. The lead operative was already recovering, shaking off the illusion with a practiced disruption pulse, but Kurenai had bought them a gap and they plowed through it. They hit the street at a dead sprint. The morning crowd, civilians, shopkeepers, a few off-duty genin, scattered as 2 people in civilian clothes burst from an alley like they'd been fired from a cannon. Naruto's mind raced. The dampening compound was still suppressing his chakra, but the adrenaline was burning through it, and he could feel the fox stirring in response to the threat. Not the full surge, not the red chakra flood that came with genuine mortal danger, but a warming, a readying like a furnace stoking its flames. "The compound on my hands," he gasped as they ran. "It's wearing off. I can feel my chakra coming back. Good, we're going to need it." Kurenai pulled him around a corner, through a narrow passage between 2 apartment buildings and into a small courtyard. She pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes, sensing. Now, Naruto reached out. His field was patchy, still partially dampened, but enough to register the pursuit. 2 signatures, moving fast, converging on their position from different angles. The third was still hidden, either holding position or circling around for a cutoff. 2 closing from the south and west. The third one, I can't pin it. The third one is the handler. They'll be directing the others, not engaging directly. Kurenai opened her eyes. We can't outrun them. We can't fight them, not unarmed, not without full access to our chakra. So we do the third thing, which is disappear. She looked at him, and despite everything, the danger, the pursuit, the earth-shattering revelations of the past hour, there was something fierce and alive in her expression. I'm about to teach you the most important genjutsu lesson of all, the one I've been building toward since day 1. Which is, the best genjutsu isn't cast on the enemy, it's cast on the environment. You don't make them see something that isn't there, you make them not see something that is. She grabbed his hand, not the brief tactical touches of their training sessions. A firm grip, palm to palm, and through the contact, Naruto felt her chakra flow into him, controlled, precise, threading through his pathways alongside his own energy like a river merging with another river. I can extend my genjutsu through physical contact, she said, speaking fast. It's a technique I've never taught anyone. Right now, I'm weaving both of us into the environment. To anyone looking at this courtyard, we're not here. We're a wall, a shadow, a patch of unremarkable space. Their eyes will slide right over us. Naruto could feel the illusion taking shape, not around him, but through him. Kurenai's chakra was painting them both into the background, matching their visual and chakra signatures to the courtyard's ambient environment. It was the genjutsu equivalent of active camouflage, and it was astonishingly complex. Don't move, she whispered. Don't breathe loudly. Don't let your chakra spike. If the fox reacts to my chakra in your system and triggers the immunity response, the camouflage drops and we're made. Naruto gritted his teeth and concentrated. The fox's chakra was stirring, sensing the foreign intrusion of Kurenai's energy, beginning the automatic immune response that would normally purge genjutsu from his system. He pushed back against it, not suppressing the fox, but communicating. Not an enemy, not an attack, Let it be the fox's chakra hesitated, churned, and then slowly settled. Not passive, watchful, alert, but allowing the foreign chakra to remain, footsteps in the passage. The first root operative burst into the courtyard, mask turning, scanning. He was 3 meters away. Naruto could see the moisture of his breath on the inside of the mask, the slight rise and fall of his chest. The operative looked directly at them, through them. His gaze swept the courtyard, walls, corners, shadows, the drain pipe, the weathered wooden door at the far end, and found nothing. He made a hand signal. The second operative appeared at the courtyard's other entrance, confirming from a different angle. Another sweep. Another nothing. A third hand signal. Both operatives turned and left, moving in coordinated silence toward the next search zone. Naruto and Kurenai stood in the courtyard, invisible, breathing the same air as the people hunting them, for 90 seconds after the operatives had gone. Then Kurenai released his hand, and the genjutsu dissolved like morning frost. Naruto's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall and stood there, shaking, while the adrenaline crash rolled through him like a wave. "That was close," he said. "That was too close." Kurenai's composure was cracking now, the professional mask giving way to something raw and shaken. They were waiting. Not following, waiting. They knew we were in the archives. They had operatives prepositioned, which means the forged credentials tripped something. Or the dead Jounin's clearance was being monitored, or both. Kurenai pressed her palm against the courtyard wall and leaned into it. "We got what we came for. The copies are intact, but Root knows now. They know I'm actively investigating, they know I've accessed the mission files, and they know you're involved." The weight of that settled over Naruto like a second skin. He was in it now. Not because of blackmail, not because of curiosity, not because of some abstract sense of justice. He was in it because 3 blank-masked operatives had looked at him and decided he was a target, and you couldn't undo that kind of attention. "What's our next move?" he asked. Kurenai looked at him. Shaking, pale, furious, and beautiful in the way that things under enormous pressure were beautiful, compressed, intense, luminous. "We get these copies somewhere safe," she said. "We don't go back to our usual patterns. They'll be watching my apartment, your apartment, the training locations. Everything changes as of right now. Where do we go? I have a safe house, a place I prepared for exactly this contingency." She pushed off the wall. "But first, we need to lose any trailing surveillance, which means we move through the densest parts of the village where the crowd noise makes sensing difficult." They left the courtyard through a side passage that opened onto a busy commercial street. The morning market was in full swing, vendors calling, customers haggling, cartwheels rattling on cobblestone. Naruto pulled his collar up and fell into step with the crowd. Kurenai a few feet ahead of him, both of them moving with the current of foot traffic, as if they were 2 more civilians going about unremarkable business. They wove through the market district, doubled back twice, cut through a park, crossed the river on a pedestrian bridge, and entered the old residential quarter on the village's west side. The buildings here were older, close-backed, with narrow streets and interconnected courtyards that created a maze of passage options. Kurenai navigated it from memory, never hesitating, never checking landmarks, moving through the old quarter like water through channels carved long ago. The safe house was a small, second-floor apartment above a calligraphy supply shop. Kurenai produced a key from somewhere, unlocked the door, and ushered Naruto inside. It was sparse. A single room with a futon, a low table, and sealed cabinets along one wall. The windows were shuttered and reinforced with ceiling arrays that Naruto could feel even through the remnants of the dampening compound, privacy seals, designed to prevent chakra leakage and eavesdropping. Kurenai locked the door, activated the ceiling arrays with a touch, and sat down at the table. She pulled the copied scrolls from her satchel and spread them out, her hands still shaking. Naruto sat across from her. "We need to talk about what we found," he said. "I know." "The third Hokage signed off on your father's death." Kurenai's jaw tightened. "I know, and we have proof. Danzo's memorandum and the Hokage's authorization in their own handwriting." I know. Her voice was fraying at the edges. I know, Naruto. I know what we have. I know what it means. I've been thinking about what it means for a year, and now that I'm holding it in my hands, She stopped, pressed her palms flat against the table, breathed. Naruto waited. My father trusted the Hokage, she said. He trusted the system. He found wrongdoing and reported it through proper channels, because that's what you do. That's what the will of fire is supposed to mean, that the village is more than any one person, that the institutions protect the people within them. Her voice was quiet, but each word carried the weight of long-held conviction meeting irrefutable evidence. And the Hokage heard his report, weighed the costs, and decided my father's life was an acceptable price for protecting the village's stability. Not an enemy's decision, an administrator's. A calculation. He was wrong, Naruto said. Was he? Kurenai looked up, and the question was genuine, searching. Danzo's operations were illegal, unauthorized, dangerous, but they were also effective. The intelligence networks he built, the covert operations he ran, they kept Konoha's enemies destabilized and off balance. If my father's report had been acted on, if Danzo had been exposed and Root dismantled, those networks would have collapsed. Konoha would have been vulnerable. People would have died. Other people died instead. Your father died. One man versus the village. That's the calculus. That's always the calculus. Kurenai's voice broke on the last word, and she turned away. And I hate it. I hate that it makes sense. I hate that I can see the logic even while I'm drowning in the injustice of it. Naruto stared at the scrolls spread between them, the memorandum with its clinical language, organic resolution, operational attrition, words designed to make murder sound like paperwork. It doesn't make sense. He said. Kurenai turned back. It doesn't make sense, he repeated, because the calculus is wrong. It assumes the only options were protect Danzo's operations or expose everything and accept the fallout, but those weren't the only options. The third could have reined Danzo in quietly. Could have put oversight on Root without dismantling it. Could have protected your father by transferring him, classifying his knowledge, 100 different things. Instead, he took the path that required the least effort and the most sacrifice from someone else. That's not the will of fire. That's cowardice. The word hung in the air between them. Cowardice. Applied to the third Hokage, the god of shinobi, the man who had led Konoha through wars and crises and been revered as one of the greatest leaders in the village's history. Kurenai stared at him. You knew him. He was kind to you. He was the only person who was kind to me for a long time, and I loved him for it. I still love him for it. Naruto's throat was tight. But loving someone doesn't mean they were right about everything. It means you carry the whole truth about them, the good and the bad, and you don't pretend one cancels out the other. Kurenai was quiet for a long time. The safe house was silent except for the muffled sounds of the village outside the shuttered windows. Street noise. Life. The ordinary world continuing to turn while, in a small room above a calligraphy shop, two people sat with the evidence of a murdered man and tried to figure out what to do about it. Asuma needs to know, Kurenai said finally. Naruto nodded. He'd been waiting for her to reach that conclusion on her own. I've been protecting him from this, lying to him, keeping distance. She rubbed her face with both hands. But if Root is active, if they know about me, if they know about you, Asuma is already in danger by association. He deserves to know why. When? Tonight. I'll go to him tonight. Do you want me there? Kurenai looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Surprise, maybe, that he'd offered, or recognition that the offer meant something she hadn't expected to receive. No, she said. This is something I need to do alone, but thank you. She began rolling up the copied scrolls, organizing them into a sequence that told the story of her father's murder from first deployment to final authorization. Her hands had stopped shaking. The grief was still there, it would always be there, but it had been joined by something harder. Purpose, direction. The knowledge that the truth was no longer a phantom she was chasing through fog. It was real, it was documented, and it was in her hands. Naruto, she said as she worked. Yeah. In the courtyard, when I extended my genjutsu through you, The fox's chakra started to reject it. You stopped it. Yeah. How? He thought about it. I talked to it, not with words, more like I pushed a feeling at it, the feeling that you weren't a threat. That your chakra was allowed to be there. Kurenai stopped rolling scrolls. You communicated with the Ninetails chakra, deliberately, and it listened. I guess so. That's not supposed to be possible. Tailed beast chakra is considered autonomous. It reacts instinctively, without direction from the host. What you're describing is cooperative interaction, integration, not just coexistence. Naruto shrugged. I don't know the theory. I just knew that if the fox burned off your camouflage, we were dead. So I asked it not to. Kurenai set down the scrolls and looked at him with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. You're more than I thought you were, she said. When you found me in that forest, I thought you were a nuisance. A loud, clumsy, desperate kid who'd stumbled into something beyond him and was going to make everything worse. She paused. I was wrong about every part of that except the desperate, and even the desperation, it's not weakness. It's fuel. You run on it like other people run on ambition or duty. I run on ramen, actually. Kurenai's mouth twitched, not a smile, but closer than ever. Get some rest, she said. Stay here, the safe house is secure, and you shouldn't go back to your apartment until we know whether Root has it under surveillance. I'll send word after I've spoken to Asuma. She moved to the door, paused, and looked back. Naruto, when the operative in the alley told you to step away. That this didn't concern you. Her voice was quiet. Why did you stay? Naruto met her eyes. Because it does concern me. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she unlocked the door and slipped out into the afternoon light. And Naruto was alone in the safe house with the evidence of a conspiracy. And the complicated, expanding sense that his life had permanently changed direction. He didn't sleep. He tried. The futon was comfortable enough, and his body was exhausted from the morning's events. But his mind wouldn't stop cycling through images. The memorandum with its sterile language, the authorization with the third's handwriting, the blank-faced Root operative standing 3 meters away and looking through him as if he were made of glass. Instead, he sat at the table and studied the copied scrolls. Reading the mission files in sequence told a story that was chilling in its clarity. Over the course of 4 missions spanning 6 weeks, Kurenai's father, Yuhai Shinku, had been systematically maneuvered into position. Each deployment moved him closer to the operational zone where Root's unauthorized activities were concentrated. Each mission was plausible on its own routine assignments that any Jounin might receive, but taken together, they formed a corridor, a funnel. A path that led inexorably to a place where a man who knew too much could be eliminated under the cover of combat operations. It was murder designed to look like war, and it had worked perfectly for nearly 2 decades. Naruto rolled up the scrolls and stared at the wall. The third Hokage had done this. The old man who'd given Naruto his first birthday present, a stuffed frog, he still had it somewhere, had signed the order that killed Kurenai's father. And he'd done it not out of malice but out of pragmatism, which was somehow worse. Malice you could fight. Pragmatism just shrugged and moved on, a knock at the door. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, Kurenai's signal. Naruto opened the door. Kurenai stepped inside and she wasn't alone. Asuma Sarutobi filled the doorway behind her. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, solid, with the kind of physical presence that made rooms feel smaller. His face was set in an expression that Naruto had never seen on the normally easygoing Jounin. Something between anguish and iron resolve, like a man who had walked through fire and was still walking. Uzumaki, Asuma said. His voice was rough. Asuma-sensei. Asuma looked at Kurenai, who nodded. He stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned against the wall. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket, looked at it, and put it back. His hands wanted something to do and didn't know what. She told me everything, he said. About her father, about the investigation, about you. He met Naruto's eyes. About my father. The air in the safe house was very still. I'm sorry, Naruto said. Don't be. Asuma's voice cracked on the second word, and he paused, jaw working, until he had control again. You didn't do this. My father did this, and now I get to figure out what to do with that. He pushed off the wall and moved to the table where the copied scrolls were still spread out. He looked down at them but didn't touch them, as if they were something that might burn. I've read them, he said. Kurenai showed me at my apartment. I read every word. His hand found the cigarette again, and this time he lit it, drawing a long breath of smoke that he held for several seconds before exhaling toward the ceiling. My father was a good man. That's what everyone says. That's what I believed. What I still believe, even now, which makes me either a fool or a son or both. You're not a fool, Kurenai said quietly. Then I'm a son who has to accept that his father was capable of. Asuma trailed off. The cigarette trembled between his fingers. Of sanctioning the death of an innocent man to protect a political arrangement. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The question, Asuma said, is what we do now. Kurenai sat down at the table. Root knows about the investigation. They intercepted us at the archives. 3 operatives, coordinated containment formation. We evaded, but they'll have reported to Danzo by now. So the old man knows. The old man knows, and he's going to act. Danzo doesn't wait for problems to resolve themselves, he resolves them. Quickly, quietly, and permanently. Asuma took another drag. Options? 3 that I can see. Kurenai laid her hands flat on the table. First, we take the evidence to the current Hokage. Tsunade is not the third. She has no loyalty to Danzo and no reason to protect Root's operations. She could act on this, order an investigation, suspend Danzo's authority, dismantle Root. But, Naruto said, going through official channels means the evidence enters the bureaucratic system. Danzo has allies on the council. He has leverage on people throughout the administration. The evidence could be suppressed, discredited, or mysteriously lost before it reaches anyone who would act on it. We've seen that exact pattern before. My father went through channels, and channels killed him. Option 2, Asuma asked. We go public. Leak the evidence to the broader Jounin Corps, the clan heads, the civilian government. Make it impossible to suppress through sheer volume. If enough people know, no amount of political maneuvering can put the genie back in the bottle. That would tear the village apart, Asuma said flatly. It would destabilize the current power structure. Whether that constitutes tearing the village apart depends on how much of the current structure is worth preserving. Asuma stared at her. Something passed between them, the silent, charged communication of 2 people who knew each other deeply and were navigating territory that threatened the foundation of their relationship. Option 3, Kurenai said. Let me guess, Naruto said. We go after Danzo directly. Kurenai nodded. Not to kill him, to neutralize him politically. We use the evidence not as an accusation, but as a lever, the same kind of lever Danzo has used against others for decades. We force him into a position where his power is checked, his operations are brought under oversight, and the truth about people like my father is acknowledged. Not publicly, not in a way that destroys the village, but in a way that ensures it never happens again. That's the most dangerous option. Asuma said, it's the only option that achieves justice without collateral damage. Asuma finished his cigarette and crushed it out against the wall. He looked at Kurenai, then at Naruto, then at the scrolls on the table. My father is dead, he said. Nothing we do changes what he did. But if Danzo is still operating the same way, and we know he is, because he sent 3 operatives after you this morning, then this isn't about the past. It's about what happens next. About who gets sent on the next suicide mission. About whose father doesn't come home. He straightened up. I'm in. What do you need? Kurenai looked at him with an expression that was complicated and raw and full of something that might have been love, if love could survive this much damage. I need your political knowledge, she said. You understand the council, the power dynamics, the pressure points. Your father's legacy gives you access to people and places that I can't reach. And me? Naruto asked. Kurenai turned to him. I need you to be exactly what Root can't handle. Unpredictable, persistent, and immune to their tricks. You're the piece they can't account for, Naruto. Every model they have, every strategy they've developed is built for conventional threats. You're not conventional, Naruto nodded slowly. There's something else. Someone else we might need. Who? Shikamaru Nara. Asuma's eyebrows rose. My student. He already suspects something. He approached me 2 days ago, said I looked like a man with a plan, and offered to help if things went sideways. Naruto paused. And we need someone smarter than any of us to look at the evidence and build a strategy. No offense. None taken, Kurenai said. Shikamaru is the best analytical mind of his generation, but bringing in more people increases the risk of exposure. Shikamaru can keep a secret, and more than that, he'd see angles we're missing, connections we haven't made. If we're going up against someone like Danzo, we can't afford blind spots. Asuma was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the idea of pulling his student into something that could get them all killed. Let me talk to him, Asuma said finally. He's my student. If anyone tells him, it should be me. Carefully, Kurenai said. Kurenai, Asuma's voice was gentle. I've been careful my whole life. My father was careful. Look where careful got us. He moved toward the door. I'll talk to Shikamaru tonight. We meet tomorrow here, Dawn. And we start building a plan that ends this. He opened the door, paused, and looked back at Naruto. You blackmailed my girlfriend into teaching you, he said. Naruto winced. Technically, no, I get it. Asuma's expression was unreadable. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's shinobi thinking. A beat. But if you ever tell anyone I said that, I'll deny it and then I'll make you run laps until your legs fall off. He left. The door closed. The safe house was quiet again. Kurenai sat at the table, staring at the space where Asuma had been. That went better than I expected, she said. He loves you, Naruto said. That makes things simpler. Love doesn't make anything simpler. It makes everything harder, and then it makes it worth doing anyway. She gathered the scrolls and stored them in one of the sealed cabinets. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts the next phase. Naruto lay down on the futon and closed his eyes. This time, sleep came, not easily, not peacefully, but it came. And in the darkness behind his eyelids, the fox's chakra pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm that felt, for the first time, less like a caged beast and more like a heartbeat. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Foundation. Shikamaru Nara arrived at the safe house at dawn with the expression of a man who had been dragged out of bed for something troublesome and had already concluded it was going to get worse. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, his eyes moving across the room, the sealed cabinets, the shuttered windows, the privacy seals humming in the walls, and sighed so deeply it seemed to come from somewhere around his ankles. This is going to be a drag, he said. Sit down, Shikamaru, Asuma said from the table. I'm just saying. You pull me aside last night with that face, tell me we need to talk somewhere private at dawn, and now I'm in a safe house that smells like sealing wax and paranoia. He dropped into a cross-legged position at the table with the boneless grace of someone who'd perfected the art of sitting. So, how bad is it? Kurenai laid out the evidence. She did it methodically, the way she did everything. Scrolls in chronological order, context before content, facts before interpretation. She started with her father and ended with the root operatives in the alley. The whole story compressed into 20 minutes of precise, unemotional narration. Shikamaru listened without interrupting. His eyes were half-lidded, his posture unchanged, and to someone who didn't know him, he might have looked bored. Naruto knew better. He'd watched Shikamaru during the Chunin exams, had seen that same deceptive stillness right before the Nara heir had dismantled Temari's offense with a strategy so layered that even the jounin in the stands hadn't seen it coming. Shikamaru's laziness was a shell. Underneath it, a mind like a steel trap was already sorting, connecting, mapping. When Kurenai finished, Shikamaru was quiet for nearly a full minute. Then he reached forward and tapped the memorandum, the one with Danzo's initials. This is genuine, he said. Copied directly from the original in the classified archives. And the authorization from the third? Same. Shikamaru sat back. He laced his fingers behind his head and stared at the ceiling. My first instinct is to tell you you're all insane, he said conversationally. A Jounin, a former Hokage son, and the village Jinchuriki, conspiring to take down one of the most powerful men in Konoha based on 20-year-old documents that were obtained through forged credentials and are technically stolen government property. He paused. My second instinct is to ask why you didn't come to me sooner. Asuma leaned forward. You see something? I see several things. First, the evidence is strong but not unassailable. Danzo will argue the memorandum is a forgery, that the authorization is taken out of context, that the mission file shows a tragic operational failure rather than a deliberate execution. He'll have lawyers, allies on the council, and decades of political capital to throw at discrediting this. We know that, Kurenai said. That's why we're not going through official channels. Right, you want option 3, the political neutralization. Shikamaru's gaze dropped from the ceiling to the scrolls, which is the smart play, actually. Danzo's power isn't military, Root is dangerous, but it's small. His power is political. Information, leverage, alliances built on mutual compromise. You don't beat him by fighting him. You beat him by making him more expensive to protect than to abandon. Naruto was watching Shikamaru with something close to awe. In 3 minutes, the Nara had cut through the emotional weight of the situation and identified the structural weakness they needed to exploit. It had taken Naruto and Kurenai weeks to reach roughly the same conclusion. How? Naruto asked. Shikamaru held up one finger. The council. There are 3 members besides Danzo, Himura, Koharu, and the Hokage herself. Himura and Koharu are old guard, conservative, and historically allied with Danzo, but their alliance is based on mutual benefit, not loyalty. If the cost of protecting Danzo becomes higher than the cost of cutting him loose, they'll cut him loose. Second finger. The Jounin commander, Shikaku Nara. He paused. My father. He controls the operational side of the village's military structure. If the Jounin Corps loses confidence in Danzo, the commander has the authority to recommend restructuring the advisory council. That's a political earthquake, but it's legal. Third finger. The clan heads, particularly the Hyuga, the Aburame, and the Yamanaka. They've had quiet grievances with Root for years. Disappearances of minor clan members, unauthorized intelligence operations on clan territory. The general principle that a shadow military answering to one man is fundamentally incompatible with the clan system. They've never acted because there was never a catalyst. He lowered his hand. We give them a catalyst. Kurenai was staring at him with an expression that Naruto recognized from his own early training sessions, the look of someone reassessing their estimate of what a young shinobi was capable of. You've thought about this before, she said. I think about everything. It's a curse. Shikamaru shifted his weight. My dad and I have had conversations, not about this specifically, but about Danzo, about Root, about the structural problems in the village's governance. Dad knows more than he lets on. He always does. Would he help? Asuma asked. If the evidence is solid and the approach is politically viable, yes. He's not going to stick his neck out for a vendetta, but for a legitimate restructuring of the command hierarchy. For bringing an unaccountable paramilitary under proper oversight, that's something he'd support. Shikamaru paused, but he'd need to be convinced it won't blow up the village in the process, which means we need a plan that's airtight. He reached forward and began rearranging the scrolls on the table, pulling them into a different order, not chronological but structural, grouping evidence by the institutions it implicated. Here's what I see as the path. Step 1, we need more evidence. What we have implicates Danzo in one murder. That's damning but containable. He'll sacrifice the specific operation and claim it was an isolated decision made during wartime under extreme pressure. What we need is a pattern. Multiple instances of Root overreach, unauthorized operations, abuse of power. We need to show that this wasn't an exception. It was the rule. The archives would have more, Kurenai said, but after yesterday, accessing them again is out of the question. Agreed. Which is why we don't go back to the archives. Shikamaru tapped the table. We go to the people. Root has been operating for decades. In that time, they've burned assets, compromised operations, and made enemies within the village's own infrastructure. There are people, retired shinobi, former intelligence officers, even ex-Root operatives, who have pieces of the puzzle. They've been silent because they're afraid, and because they had no one to be silent to. We give them someone. A network, Naruto said, an informal one, quiet conversations. Connections made through trusted intermediaries. We don't need sworn testimony, we need corroboration. Enough independent sources pointing to the same pattern that the evidence becomes overwhelming. That takes time, Kurenai said. And after yesterday, time is what we don't have. Danzo knows I'm investigating. He'll move to shut this down. Which brings us to step 2. Shikamaru's expression darkened. Defense. We need to know what Root is doing right now, where their operatives are, who they're watching, what their response protocol looks like. We're playing a game against someone who's been playing longer than we've been alive. We need intelligence. I can help with that, Naruto said. Everyone looked at him. Shadow clones. I can create dozens of them, each with my sensing ability. Spread them through the village, passive surveillance. If Root operatives are moving, I'll feel them. Shikamaru's eyebrows rose fractionally. You can share sensing ability with clones. The clones inherit whatever skills I have at the time of creation. Kurenai's been training me in chakra sensing for 2 weeks. The clones can sense. And when they dispel, you get the memories back. Every detail. Shikamaru stared at him for a long moment, then turned to Kurenai. You taught him sensing in 2 weeks. He's a faster learner than his reputation suggests. Shikamaru actually laughed, a short, surprised sound. Clearly. He turned back to Naruto. How many clones can you maintain while keeping the sensing ability active in each one? I haven't tested the limit. 20, maybe 30. Each one would have a reduced range compared to me, but if I space them across the village, you'd create a sensor net. A passive, distributed surveillance grid covering most of Konoha. Shikamaru was leaning forward now, the laziness entirely gone, his eyes sharp with the particular brightness of a strategic mind encountering an unexpected resource. That's actually brilliant. Root's entire operational model is based on individual operatives moving through the village with suppressed signatures. A distributed sensor net counters that directly because it doesn't rely on one sensor getting lucky. It relies on statistical coverage. If an operative passes through any clone's range, they're detected. The clones would need cover, Kurenai said. 30 Narutos wandering the village would be noticed. Transformation jutsu, Naruto said. Each clone transforms into a different civilian. Henge is the one thing I've been good at since the academy. He's right about that, Shikamaru said. His transformation technique fooled a Jounin examiner during the graduation test. If each clone takes a different civilian identity and disperses to a different location. Then we have eyes everywhere, Asuma finished, and Root doesn't know it. The room was quiet for a moment as the implications settled. Do it today, Shikamaru said. Deploy the net, start mapping Root's movements. I want to know how many operatives they have active in the village, where they're concentrated, and whether there's a pattern to their surveillance. He turned to Kurenai. Meanwhile, I need you to give me everything you have on Root's organizational structure. Personnel estimates, known bases, operational protocols, everything your investigation has uncovered. Some of it is fragmentary. Fragments are fine, I work with fragments, he paused. And Asuma, I need you to start the quiet conversations. The clan heads, the retired Jounin, the intelligence community, not directly about Danzo, not yet, just take the temperature. Find out who's uncomfortable with the current structure and who's willing to talk about it. Asuma nodded. My father's name will open some doors, and close others. Be careful which ones you knock on. Shikamaru stood, stretched, and looked around the safe house with an expression that was equal parts resignation and dark amusement. For the record, he said, this is exactly the kind of troublesome situation I've spent my entire life trying to avoid. The fact that I'm voluntarily participating tells you something about either the importance of the cause or the severity of my character flaws. Noted, Kurenai said. Good, dawn tomorrow, same place, bring everything. He shuffled to the door with the posture of a man being led to his own execution by inconvenience, opened it, and paused. Naruto. Yeah, the sensing net. When you deploy it, make sure at least 2 clones cover the area around the safe house. If Root tracks us here, I want to know before they knock. He left. The door closed. Naruto, Kurenai, and Asuma sat in the silence he left behind. He's terrifying, Naruto said. He gets it from his father. Asuma said, and for the first time since learning the truth about the third, something like warmth crossed his face. Shikaku will be the same way. See the whole board in 10 seconds and then complain about how troublesome it is while he dismantles the opposition. Kurenai gathered the scrolls. We have our assignments. Naruto, the sensor net, start as soon as possible. On it. He was halfway to the door when Kurenai's voice stopped him. How's your genjutsu immunity, the fox chakra modulation? He paused. With everything that had happened at the archives, the evidence, the Root encounter, the escape, they hadn't trained in 2 days. The longest break since they'd started. I've been practicing the internal exercises, the boundary work, the modulation drills. It feels stable. Like it's becoming automatic. Good, because if Root engages us again, their first move will be genjutsu. Memory alteration, perception control, it's how they operate. Your immunity is our insurance policy. She met his eyes. Don't let it lapse. Naruto stood on the roof of his apartment building. He'd returned after Kurenai confirmed through her own reconnaissance that his place wasn't under active surveillance, and created 32 shadow clones. They appeared in a silent burst of chakra and displaced air, 32 copies of himself arranged across the rooftop in neat rows. Each one looked at him with his own eyes, each carried his sensing ability, and each understood the mission through the shared knowledge that was the shadow clone technique's greatest gift. Transform, he said. Different people. Civilians, merchants, genin, whatever fits where you're going. No two the same. Spread across the village in a grid pattern, I want coverage from the main gate to the Hokage Monument, east wall to west wall. Maintain passive sensing at all times. If you detect a suppressed chakra signature, cold, still, deliberately hidden, note the location, the time, the direction of movement, and the signature characteristics. Do not engage, do not reveal yourself. If you're compromised, dispel immediately so I get the information. 32 heads nodded. Go. They went. 32 transformations flared and faded, and 32 different people dropped from the rooftop and scattered into the village. A middle-aged woman heading toward the market. A young genin jogging toward the training fields. An old man shuffling toward the park. A merchant's assistant carrying a box of supplies. Each one unremarkable, each one invisible, each one carrying a piece of Naruto's awareness like a lantern behind a screen. Naruto sat on the roof and closed his eyes. The sensation was extraordinary. 32 points of consciousness, spread across the village, each feeding sensory data back to him through the shadow clone link. Not real-time, the information would only consolidate when a clone dispelled, but the clones themselves were processing and remembering. When they came back, he'd have a comprehensive map of the village's chakra landscape from 32 simultaneous perspectives. He'd never used the shadow clone technique like this before. It had always been a combat tool. Overwhelm the enemy with numbers, sacrifice clones for tactical advantage, use the memory feedback for training repetition. But Kurenai's instruction and Shikamaru's strategic thinking had opened a new dimension. The shadow clone wasn't just a weapon. It was an intelligence platform. He maintained the clones for 6 hours. It was exhausting, not the chakra cost, which his reserves handled easily, but the cognitive load of sustaining 32 independent instances of himself, each making decisions, each interacting with the world, each maintaining a transformed appearance and a sensing field. By early afternoon, He had a splitting headache and the familiar bone-deep weariness that came from dividing his consciousness too many ways. He recalled the clones in groups of 4, spacing the returns to avoid the memory dump overwhelming his brain. Each returning clone brought a flood of information, 6 hours of sensory data, compressed into a burst of memory that hit him like a wave breaking against a cliff. He sat on his apartment floor with a notebook open on his knees and recorded everything as it came in. Clone 1, stationed near the main gate. 2 suppressed signatures detected, moving in tandem, entering the village at 0840. Direction: northeast toward the administrative district. Signatures: cold, professional, route profile. Clone 7, stationed near the Hawkage Tower. 1 suppressed signature, stationary, present for the entire 6-hour observation period, located on the roof of a building 3 blocks east of the tower. Overwatch position, route profile. Clone 12, stationed in the market district. 3 suppressed signatures, moving independently, conducting what appeared to be foot surveillance on civilian targets. Naruto noted the targets' locations and descriptions. 2 were shops, 1 was a residential address. Clone 19, stationed near the Hyuga compound. 1 suppressed signature, extremely well concealed, detected only because the clone had been within 50 meters. Stationary, positioned in a tree with line of sight to the compound's main entrance. Surveillance on the Hyuga clan. Clone 23, stationed in the old residential quarter near the safe house. Nothing. Clean. Shikamaru's precaution had been warranted, but the safe house remained undetected. Clone 28, stationed near Training Field 11, their original training site. 1 suppressed signature, moving slowly through the area, pausing at locations where Naruto and Kurenai had trained. Searching. Tracing. By the time the last clone had returned, and the last memory had been processed, Naruto had filled 8 pages of the notebook. He stared at the data, trying to make sense of it the way Shikamaru would. 14 route operatives detected across the village in a single 6-hour window. That was more than any of them had estimated. Danzo's unofficial army wasn't a handful of agents. It was a substantial force, distributed throughout Konoha, conducting persistent surveillance on multiple targets simultaneously. And one of them was retracing his training sessions with Kurenai. Naruto closed the notebook and sat in the gathering darkness of his apartment, thinking. The route operative at Training Field 11 was a problem. It meant they'd identified the training site, probably from the initial observation Naruto had detected during his first sensing lesson. They'd followed up, searched the area, and were now trying to reconstruct what had happened there. They wouldn't find much. Kurenai was careful about physical evidence, but the fact that they were looking meant they were building a case. Connecting dots. He needed to tell the others. Tonight. The safe house at dusk. All 4 of them around the table, the privacy seals active, the shutters closed. Naruto's notebook open in the center, 8 pages of data that changed the shape of the game. Shikamaru read through the notes in silence, his eyes moving in quick, precise passes across the pages. When he finished, he set the notebook down and steepled his fingers. 14 operatives, he said. Active, deployed in a single 6-hour window. Extrapolating from that, assuming shift rotations, and assuming not all operatives were active simultaneously, Route's village-based force is probably between 30 and 40 personnel. That's a small army, Asuma said. It's a large intelligence service. There's a difference. Shikamaru pointed to the entry about the Hyuga compound. Surveillance on the Hyuga. That's interesting. The Hyuga are the one clan that Route has never been able to penetrate. The Byakugan makes conventional infiltration nearly impossible. If Danzo is watching them from outside, it means he considers them a potential threat. Or a potential asset he hasn't acquired yet, Kurenai said. Same thing from Danzo's perspective. Shikamaru moved to the entry about Training Field 11. This is the urgent concern. They're retracing your training activities. If they identify the ravine site, they'll find residual chakra traces from the fox chakra modulation exercises. That's a distinctive signature. Nobody else in the village produces it. They'll know Naruto was there, and from there, it's a short step to determining he was there with a genjutsu specialist. Can we mislead them? Naruto asked. I could send clones to train at other sites, leave residual signatures in multiple locations, muddy the trail. Shikamaru considered this. That's not bad. Create enough false positives, and the real data becomes noise. Do it. Tonight, if possible. Hit 5 or 6 training sites across the village with fox chakra exercises. I'll need to actually use the fox's chakra to make the signatures convincing. Then be brief and be gone before anyone investigates the flare. Shikamaru turned to the broader data set. Now, the distribution pattern of the operatives tells us something. They're concentrated in 3 areas: the administrative district, the clan compounds, and the commercial district. The admin concentration is expected, that's where the power is. The clan compounds we've discussed, but the commercial district is interesting. Why? Asuma asked. Because the commercial district is where information flows: merchants, travelers, message services, courier networks. If Danzo is monitoring commercial activity, he's watching the village's communication infrastructure. Which means he's looking for leaks, Kurenai finished. He knows someone has been communicating with external contacts, my investigation, and he's monitoring the channels that communication might use. Exactly, and that gives us an opportunity. Shikamaru pulled a blank sheet of paper toward him and began sketching a rough map of the village. If we know where Root's eyes are, we can operate in the gaps. The sensor net showed us their deployment pattern. We use that pattern against them, move in the blind spots, communicate through channels they're not watching, build our network in the spaces between their surveillance. He marked locations on the map. The sensor net needs to be continuous. Naruto, can you maintain it daily? I can do 2 6-hour shifts, morning and evening. The gap in the middle might be a problem. We'll work around it. The morning shift catches their day rotation. The evening shift catches the night rotation. Comparing the two will show us if they change patterns or positions. Shikamaru set down the pencil. This is our foundation. Everything else builds on it. What about the larger strategy? Kurenai asked. The evidence gathering, the political groundwork. We run them in parallel. Asuma works the political angle, quiet conversations, sounding out potential allies. I work the analytical angle, building the case, identifying patterns in Root's historical operations, finding corroborating sources. Kurenai, you continue training Naruto and developing the fox chakra genjutsu immunity. If this goes to a confrontation, that ability may be the single most important tool we have. And the evidence we already have, Naruto asked. We protect it. Multiple copies stored in separate locations. I want at least 4 independent caches, this safe house, a location only Asuma knows, a location only Kurenai knows, and 1 more. He looked at Naruto. Somewhere only you can access. Naruto thought about it. The Toad summons. I can seal a copy into a storage scroll and give it to one of the messenger toads at Mount Mayaboku. Nobody in Konoha can access the Toad dimension without the summoning contract. Shikamaru blinked. Then he smiled, a thin, genuine smile that transformed his usually bored face into something almost predatory. See, this is why I'm glad you're on our side. That's an interdimensional evidence locker. Danzo can send every Root operative he has, and they can't touch it. Naruto couldn't help it, he grinned. In the middle of all of this, the danger and the conspiracy and the weight of what they were doing, Shikamaru Nara had just complimented his idea, and it felt good. Do it tonight, Shikamaru said, and then get some rest. We're going to need everyone sharp for what comes next. The meeting broke up. Asuma and Kurenai left together, an image that gave Naruto a brief, uncomplicated pleasure, because despite everything, they were still finding their way back to each other. Shikamaru lingered. Naruto? Yeah. Shikamaru was standing by the door, his hands back in his pockets, his posture returned to its characteristic slouch, but his eyes were clear and serious. Asuma told me how this started. The blackmail. Naruto's stomach tightened. Yeah, not my finest moment. Disagree. Shikamaru leaned against the doorframe. You had no leverage, no power, no connections. The one person in a position to help you had no reason to, so you created a reason. That's not shameful, that's strategic. The only difference between what you did and what Jounin do every day in the field is that they have institutional backing and you had desperation. I'm not sure Kurenai sees it that way. Kurenai sees it exactly that way. She's a Jounin, she understands leverage. And from what Asuma tells me, she stopped resenting it about a week in. He paused. You know why? Why? Because you used your leverage to ask for training, not money, not secrets, not power, training. The one thing you actually needed, the one thing nobody was giving you. Shikamaru's voice was quiet. That told her who you are better than anything else could have. He turned and left without waiting for a response, disappearing into the evening with the unhurried gait of a man who had just started the most complex strategic operation of his life, and was, on some level, enjoying it despite himself. Naruto summoned Gamakichi in his apartment at midnight. The small toad appeared on his desk in a puff of smoke, blinking irritably. Do you have any idea what time it is? Gamakichi said. Sorry, I need a favor. At midnight. Of course you do. Naruto held up a storage scroll containing copies of the evidence, the mission files, the memorandum, the authorization. I need you to take this to Mount Mayaboku and keep it safe. Hidden, somewhere nobody from our world can find it. Gamakichi looked at the scroll, then at Naruto. The irritation faded, replaced by something more alert. Toads were smarter than most people gave them credit for, and Gamakichi had known Naruto long enough to read the seriousness in his face. How safe are we talking? Gamakichi asked. Safe enough that even if someone ransacks this entire village, the scroll survives. Gamakichi took the scroll in his small hands, turning it over. This is heavy stuff, huh? The heaviest, and you can't tell me what's in it? Not yet. Soon, maybe. But right now, the less anyone knows, the safer everyone is. Gamakichi studied him for a long moment, then tucked the scroll under his arm. I'll give it to Pa, he'll know what to do with it. But Naruto, if this is the kind of trouble I think it is, be careful. You humans are fragile, no matter how tough you think you are. I know. Gamakichi nodded once, performed his reverse summoning, and vanished in a puff of smoke. The scroll went with him, transported to a dimension beyond the reach of Root, beyond the reach of Danzo, beyond the reach of anyone who might want it destroyed. 1 copy safe. 3 more in separate caches across the village. The evidence was protected. Naruto sat on his bed and breathed. Then he made 12 shadow clones, transformed them, and sent them to 6 different training grounds to lay false foxchakra trails. The clones moved through the dark village like ghosts, leaving traces of the fox's energy at each site, enough to register on sensors, not enough to trigger an alert. By morning, the Root operative retracing his training patterns would have 6 new locations to investigate, each one a dead end that would consume time and resources. Small moves. But small moves were what wars were made of, Shikamaru had said, and Naruto was starting to believe him. The next 5 days were the most productive and exhausting of Naruto's life. He maintained the sensor net in 12-hour shifts, 30 clones out at dawn, recalled and replaced by 30 fresh clones at dusk. The data poured in like a river, and every evening he sat in the safe house with Shikamaru and transcribed the findings while the Nara heir built an increasingly detailed map of Root's operational presence in the village. The picture that emerged was comprehensive and deeply disturbing. Root had 43 active operatives deployed within Konoha's walls. Shikamaru had been close in his estimate, but the actual number was higher because Root ran overlapping shifts with shared coverage zones, meaning more bodies were needed to maintain continuous surveillance. The operatives covered every major institution: the Hawkage Tower, the Intelligence Division, the Cipher Corps, the hospital, the academy, all 4 main gates, and the clan compounds of every major family. It's a mirror village, Shikamaru said on the 3rd evening, staring at his completed map with an expression caught between admiration and horror. Danzo has built a shadow of Konoha's entire infrastructure. Every critical node has root coverage. He can monitor any communication, track any person, and respond to any perceived threat within minutes. How has nobody noticed? Asuma asked. Because it's designed to be invisible. Each operative functions independently, with minimal contact between them. There's no central base of operations. They operate out of safe houses, dead drops, and prearranged meeting points. The whole system is distributed, decentralized, and resilient against discovery. Taking out any single operative, even any 10 operatives, doesn't affect the overall network. Except we can see all of them, Naruto said. Except we can see all of them. Shikamaru tapped the map. Which is the first time in Root's history that anyone outside the organization has had a complete operational picture, and that's our biggest advantage. Kurenai had been training Naruto during the mornings, before the sensor net shifts. She'd shifted focus from fundamental skills to applied combat techniques. Genjutsu integrated taijutsu, sensory-based evasion, and the fox chakra immunity that she was working to make permanent and passive rather than requiring active concentration. The progress was rapid, almost frightening. Naruto's genjutsu detection had gone from conscious effort to reflex. His sensing range had expanded to 400 meters in open terrain, and the distributed experience from 30 clones running sensors all day was feeding back improvements at a rate that compounded on itself. Each day's worth of clone data refined his sensing ability, and each refinement was inherited by the next day's clones, creating a feedback loop of accelerating growth. You're developing faster than any student I've ever worked with, Kurenai told him on the 4th morning, after he'd detected and broken a Jounin-level genjutsu in under 3 seconds, while simultaneously maintaining a sensing field that tracked her movements and the ambient signatures of every living thing within 300 meters. The clone training method isn't just effective, it's exponential. Every clone is a parallel training instance, and you're absorbing all of them. Ironic, Naruto said. The technique nobody thought was useful for anything except throwing bodies at a problem turns out to be the most powerful training tool in existence. It's not the technique. It's you. Nobody else has the chakra reserves to sustain this kind of parallel development. A normal shinobi making 30 shadow clones would be comatose. She paused. The fox's reserves are what make this possible. Without them, you'd have hit your limit weeks ago. The fox. Always the fox, but the relationship was changing slowly in ways Naruto was only beginning to understand. The boundary between his chakra and the fox's was still there, but it was becoming more permeable. Not leaking, that would be dangerous, more like communicative. He could feel the fox's attention more clearly now, a vast, ancient presence watching from the other side of the seal with something that wasn't quite hostility and wasn't quite cooperation. Interest, maybe. The interest of a being that had existed for millennia and was, for the first time, encountering a host who was doing something other than trying to use its power as a weapon. On the 5th day, the sensor net detected something that changed everything. It was Clone 26, positioned in the underground transit system beneath the village. The old maintenance tunnels that connected Konoha's major buildings through a network of passages that most people had forgotten existed. The clone had been placed there on Shikamaru's instruction, based on a hunch that Root might use the tunnels for covert movement. The hunch was right. Clone 26 detected not 1 but 17 suppressed signatures, moving in coordinated formation through the tunnel system at approximately 2 in the afternoon. 17 operatives, moving together, converging on a single location beneath the village's administrative district. The clone tracked them to a dead end in the tunnel network, a wall that, according to the village's official infrastructure maps, was solid rock. But the 17 signatures passed through it and vanished. When Clone 26 dispelled at the end of his shift and the memory reached Naruto, he was sitting in the safe house reading a book on tactical communications that Shikamaru had lent him. The memory hit, and he sat bolt upright. "I found it," he said. Kurenai looked up from the scroll she was studying. Found what? Root's base. Underground, beneath the administrative district, there's an entrance disguised as a dead end in the maintenance tunnels. The safe house went very still. Kurenai set down her scroll. Asuma, who had been cleaning his trench knives in the corner, looked up sharply. You're certain? Kurenai asked. 17 operatives entered through a wall that isn't supposed to have an opening. They vanished behind it. The signatures disappeared, which means there's some kind of barrier or sealing array on the other side that blocks sensing. Kurenai and Asuma exchanged a look. A concealed facility would need that kind of shielding, Asuma said. If Danzo has been operating Root from a fixed base within the village this entire time, the fact that it's never been detected means it's protected by the most advanced concealment seals in existence. 17 operatives entering simultaneously, Kurenai murmured. That's not routine. That's a muster. He's gathering his forces. For what? Naruto asked. Nobody answered because nobody needed to. The reason was obvious. Danzo was preparing to deal with the threat they represented. He detected the investigation, confronted them at the archives, and now he was consolidating his forces for a decisive action. They were running out of time. Shikamaru arrived that evening and absorbed the new intelligence with the quiet, focused intensity that Naruto had come to associate with his most dangerous moods. The Nara heir at rest was lazy and affable. The Nara heir in crisis was something else entirely. A mind like a weapon, turning over possibilities with the cold precision of a machine. The base location changes the calculus, Shikamaru said, standing before the wall map he'd been building over the past 5 days. He added the tunnel entrance with a red mark. We now have something we didn't have before, a target. If we can get into that facility, we can access Root's operational records directly, not just the historical files, the current operation. Active mission orders, personnel rosters, the full scope of what Danzo is running. Getting in would be a suicide mission, Asuma said. Getting in through the front door would be a suicide mission, but we're not going through the front door. Shikamaru turned to the map. The maintenance tunnels are a maze. Dozens of branches, dead ends, and connections. If Root's base is sealed behind one wall, there may be other access points, ventilation shafts, drainage channels, structural weaknesses that aren't as well protected. We'd need to map the area around the base entrance, Kurenai said. Physical reconnaissance of the tunnel network, close enough to detect secondary access points without tripping the facility's security perimeter. That's a 2-person job, Shikamaru said. 1 sensor, 1 combat specialist. In and out, maximum stealth, with the sensor providing real-time awareness of any Root operatives in the tunnels. He looked at Naruto, then at Kurenai. The pairing was obvious. Tomorrow night, Kurenai said. After the evening sensor shift, when we have the most current data on Root's movement patterns. I'll provide you with a movement plan based on the sensor data, Shikamaru said. Optimal route, timing windows, fallback positions. Asuma will be topside, monitoring the tunnel entrances. If anything goes wrong, he's our extraction. And if something goes very wrong, Naruto asked. Then Asuma makes enough noise to cover your withdrawal while I activate the political contingency. Copies of the evidence delivered simultaneously to Tsunade, the Jounin commander, and every clan head in the village. Shikamaru's voice was steady. It's a dead man's switch. If Danzo takes us off the board, the evidence goes everywhere. He can suppress 1 copy. He can't suppress 20. The room was quiet. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on all of them. Get some rest, Shikamaru said. Tomorrow we go into the foundations. The tunnels were dark. Not the comfortable darkness of a room at night, where ambient light from windows and doorways gave the eyes something to work with. The underground maintenance network, beneath Konoha, was absolute darkness. The kind that pressed against the eyes like a physical thing, that turned the simple act of walking into an exercise in faith. Naruto moved through it with his sensing field at full extension, Kurenai a half step behind him with her hand on his shoulder. The physical contact served two purposes. It kept them together in the lightless tunnels, and it allowed Kurenai to feel his chakra fluctuations, reading the sensor data through the connection the way a navigator reads instruments. They'd entered through a maintenance access point in the old warehouse district, a rusted hatch that Shikamaru's route plan had identified as the least monitored tunnel entrance. From there, they'd descended 2 levels and moved northeast through a series of connecting passages that hadn't seen maintenance in years. The air was damp and stale, the walls rough stone, the floor uneven with accumulated sediment. Naruto's sensing field painted the world in impression and texture. He could feel the mass of the stone around them, the distant vibration of the village above, the trickle of underground water through cracks in the tunnel walls, and ahead, growing clearer with each step, the dead zone. A sphere of absolute sensory absence centered on the location where Clone 26 had tracked the 17 operatives. It wasn't natural, nature didn't create voids. This was engineered. A ceiling array that created a bubble of imperceptibility, making whatever was inside invisible to chakra sensing. 200 meters ahead, Naruto whispered. The dead zone starts. I can feel the edge, it's like a wall of nothing. My sensing stops cold. Kurenai squeezed his shoulder. Acknowledgement. They moved forward, slower now, each step placed with deliberate care. The tunnel narrowed, the ceiling dropping until they were almost crouching. Naruto tracked every detail, the direction of air currents, the moisture patterns on the walls, the subtle variations in stone density that might indicate structural features. At 100 meters from the dead zone, his sensing field picked up a detail that made him stop. Air current. He breathed. Coming from the right wall, there's a gap, a crack, or a secondary passage. The air is flowing out, which means it connects to a ventilated space. Kurenai's hand tightened on his shoulder. She moved forward, guided by his directions, and ran her fingers along the right wall. Naruto felt her chakra shift minutely, not a technique, just the natural fluctuation of a shinobi's energy as they concentrated. She was reading the wall with her fingertips, a physical reconnaissance technique that left no chakra signature for seals to detect. Here, she whispered. A seam. The stone is fitted, not natural. Someone built a partition across a secondary passage, mortar and fitted stone, not solid rock. Can we get through? Kurenai was quiet for a moment, her fingers still exploring the seam. Not without noise. The mortar is old, but the stone is heavy. Moving it would be audible on the other side. What if we don't move it? What if we just listen? They pressed their ears against the stone. The wall was about 30 centimeters thick. Naruto could feel its density through his sensing, and on the other side, faintly, sounds filtered through. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving in regular patterns. A drill, maybe, or a patrol route, and voices, distant and distorted by the stone, but present. Human voices conducting human business in a facility that wasn't supposed to exist. Kurenai produced a small notebook and began recording with a pencil, no light needed. She wrote by touch, each character formed by years of practice. Naruto maintained his sensing field, tracking every vibration that came through the wall, building a picture of the space beyond through sound and sensation. The facility was large. The footsteps covered distances that suggested corridors at least 50 meters long. Multiple levels, he could feel the faint vertical displacement of footsteps above and below the plane of the wall they were pressed against. And the ventilation system was extensive, which meant the facility had been designed for sustained occupation, not just occasional use. They listened for 30 minutes. In that time, Naruto cataloged 12 distinct sets of footsteps, 3 separate conversations, 2 muffled to distinguish words, and 1 event that sent a chill down his spine, a scream. Brief, high-pitched, and cut off abruptly. Coming from somewhere deep in the facility, below their current level, Kurenai's hand found his arm and gripped it. Hard, a signal. We've heard enough. They withdrew. Back through the narrow tunnel, retracing their steps with the same careful, silent movements. Naruto kept his sensing field at maximum, watching for any sign that their presence had been detected. Nothing. The tunnels were clear. Root's concealment seals worked both ways. They blocked sensing from the outside, but they also blinded the occupants to activity in the surrounding tunnels. They emerged from the maintenance hatch into the cool night air of the warehouse district. Asuma was waiting on a nearby rooftop, his cigarette a dim orange point against the dark sky. He dropped down when he saw them. "Clear?" he asked. "Clear," Kurenai said. "We found the facility. It's real, it's large, and it's active." "How large?" "Multiple levels. Extensive ventilation. At least a dozen personnel on site during our observation window." Kurenai's voice was tight, and we heard a scream. Asuma's cigarette paused halfway to his mouth. "What kind of scream?" "The kind that means someone was in pain and someone else was causing it," Naruto said. The three of them stood in the warehouse district, the village sleeping around them, the sounds of the night, crickets, distant water, the creak of old buildings, filling the spaces between their breathing. "Interrogation," Asuma said, "or conditioning." "Root's conditioning program," Kurenai said. "The process they use to create their operatives, emotional suppression, loyalty indoctrination. I've heard rumors, but it's not a rumor anymore." They moved through the quiet streets toward the safe house, staying to shadows, maintaining the operational discipline that had become second nature over the past week. Naruto's mind was churning. The scream, brief, cut off, coming from deep underground. Someone in that facility was suffering, right now, while the village slept above them. He thought about the Root operative in the alley, the one with the blank mask and the flat voice. Stripped of everything that made a voice human. Was that what the conditioning produced? Was that what the scream was creating? Another blank-faced soldier with no identity and no will, ready to serve Danzo's vision of a village protected by shadows? The thought made him sick. At the safe house, Kurenai laid out her notes, the observations, the dimensions, the sensory data. Naruto filled in the details his sensing had captured. Asuma relayed the topside monitoring data, clean, no Root activity near the tunnel entrance during their operation. "We take this to Shikamaru in the morning," Kurenai said. "He'll incorporate it into the operational picture." "And then what?" Naruto asked. "We have the evidence. We have Root's operational map. We know where the base is. When do we move?" Kurenai and Asuma exchanged a look. The look that adults shared when the answer to a question was more complicated than the question itself. "Soon," Asuma said. "Shikamaru's been building the political groundwork. He told me yesterday that Shikaku is ready to listen. And I've had conversations with 3 clan heads, Hayashi Hyuga, Shibai Aburame, and Inoichi Yamanaka. None of them were surprised to hear that Root still exists. All of them are uncomfortable with it." "Uncomfortable isn't committed," Kurenai said. "It's a start. Give me 2 more days, 2 more conversations, then we convene the Jounin Council and present everything." "The Jounin Council," Naruto repeated. "All of them." "It's the only body with the authority to recommend action to the Hokage that can't be blocked by the Advisory Council," Asuma said. "If the full Jounin Council votes to investigate Root and Danzo, Tsunade has the political cover to act. Even Himura and Koharu can't overrule a unified Jounin Corps." "And Danzo will fight it," Kurenai said. "He'll use every weapon he has: political pressure, blackmail, threats. He may use Root directly to intimidate or silence key votes." She looked at Naruto. "That's where you come in. Your sensor net will give us real-time awareness of Root's response. And your Genjutsu immunity means their primary tool for coercing Jounin cooperation doesn't work on you. I'm the insurance policy. You're the safeguard, the one piece on the board they can't manipulate." Kurenai's voice was quiet, but something in it resonated with a weight that went beyond tactics. "2 weeks ago, you came to me because nobody would teach you. You thought you had nothing to offer except stubbornness and a borrowed threat. Look at what you've become since then." Naruto looked at his hands, the leather gloves from the archive operation scarred now from the tunnels, his hands steady and calm, no tremor, no doubt. 2 more days, he said. "And then we finish this." Kurenai nodded. Asuma crushed out his cigarette. The safe house was quiet, the privacy seals humming, the evidence secure in its caches. 2 more days. And then the shadows would answer for what they'd built in the dark.